I don't know, Russ. This weakening yen has got me worried. I can't get that many CDs, and I've already had to, as I've mentioned a few weeks ago, I had to halt construction on the cooling tower that I'm building in back of my house. I'm afraid it's going to be like the parachute ride at Coney Island, where it's just going to be this relic of this unused relic in the neighborhood.
An unfinished monument.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Right here in my in my backyard. I should sell tickets. Maybe it'll be a tourist attraction.
Hey, what we were looking at before, the price on that CD.
Oh man, the CD we reviewed the album. We talked about the album a few weeks ago. The Foltz one, Jean-Marc Foltz.
Yeah, Jean-Marc Foltz.
The jazz
Indigo.
one. Yeah,
Wonderful.
Indigo, which is a great record.
Yeah.
And I want a copy of that on CD, and it's out on CD, but they want like over $30 for it, American dollars.
Yeah.
In Japanese yen now, that's over 4,000 yen. So if you think about the normal exchange rate when things are all even, that $30 equals 3,000 Japanese yen. Right now, it's more like $30 equals 4,500 Japanese yen or something like that. It's just really nuts. You just have no buying power at all now.
4,500. That's like, a meal for two at izakaya or something. That's,
well, it was.
Yeah, it used to be.
Now it's more than that. Food prices have gone up too.
Yeah, everything's going up.
Yeah, it's not going up? My salary. So I think we just have to tough it out this year. I was thinking this was going to be our breakout year. Maybe it will be, but I mean.
We'll have to make some sacrifices. We'll have to cut out the unnecessary purchases.
Yeah, like food. Can't have any of that. Got to get the CDs.
Got to get the CDs
for the show. Everything's about the show. We're here for you, listeners.
Yeah, we've got to press on, and that CD was a clarinet CD, and
we got a lot of clarinets today.
Clarinet tonight. That's right.
Yeah,
and some spiritual practices and some
Eastern
strange
mysticism
things.
too.
Yeah,
it's going to be an intriguing episode.
We're going to venture off the normal path into some unknown lands, and it should be interesting.
Yeah. By the way, I was looking at our sort of distribution around the world on our the podcast site, and America, the United States, remains our number one listeners. Thank you, Americans, for listening. Yeah. Japan is number two. It can't be because only our friends are listening, because
we don't have that many friends.
We don't have that many friends, and I, of course, have no friends at all because I gave them all up for music. And India is number three. Thank you, Indian listeners. We're really delighted by that. Or listeners in India, let's say. And one thing I noticed that was really funny is that there was this big white swath across the top. Like nobody in Russia is listening to us.
Mm.
I'm a little surprised by that because it's a classical music place. You would think.
We have had some Russian listeners in the past. Yeah. Just not that often. Yeah.
We do have one or two Ukraine listeners, which is kind of interesting. You'd think that'd be a little more difficult to listen there, but they're tuning in, which is good.
Yeah, it's nice. We get some downloads in places you wouldn't expect. I like to look at that statistics. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, me too. We had someone from the Dominican Republic this week, which I was kind of delightfully surprised by. I just want to say, I really hope people aren't using this podcast to help them with their English, because God help us all if that's the case.
Well, I would worry more about our pronunciation of foreign names. I think there's going to be a few that will be butchered this evening.
You know what we should do? We should just do the whole thing in New York accents, and then people would be imitating us, and then I'll send them to my brother's place, and they'll all go with these weird fake New York accents, and it'll drive them crazy. It'll be fantastic. My revenge. I would love that.
You could do that. That'd be kind of funny, yeah. It'd be like the Jerky Boys do music or something.
The Jerky Boys.
Hello. Do you have my CDs? Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Well, you're listening to adult music the podcast with music for the mature mind. And this is episode 62. Wow, we're getting up there. 62 getting already. And as usual, we'll be bringing you 6 new recordings. We're going to have some classical music and some jazz, and focusing on clarinet tonight, as we hinted at.
Well, yeah, kind of. We have 1 classical clarinet tonight, but right. I think 3 classical clarinet would be a little too much.
It might be too much. And I've got 3 very different jazz clarinet, and we got some bass clarinet in there too, which we always like to hear.
Always love the bass clarinet. Yeah. There are 2 with, well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say. And we have the basset clarinet in the classical end, which is a fantastic. We'll get to that I'll talk about that when we get there.
Is that related to the basset hound?
Well,
in name only.
Yeah, maybe in sound. I don't know. I think the basset clarinet sounds much cooler at the low end. Let's just say that
than the basset hound. Yeah. Well, we'll find out. I've heard, though, that when you're learning to play the basset clarinet, it can sound like a basset hound. I believe that, yeah. Clarinet is one of those instruments where you don't want to be around a beginner. Clarinets, trumpets, and violins,
clarinet. I remember one kid, I was in 5th grade, and I don't want to say his name because he might be listening, and he played, for his presentation for the class, he played a song on the clarinet. And I remember the song was called Ciao Lucia. It was an Italian song. He was an Italian-American kid like me. And so he plays this tune solo, and I didn't know the clarinet squeaked when you just didn't play it right, but he just squeaked his way right through it. It was just horrifying.
He just kept going.
Well, I guess good for him. That's what you do. You just don't give up, right? But and who knows? He may be a clarinet soloist today, but I've never heard of him if he is.
Those first months are rough.
They are.
Yeah. Well, before we get going here, I want to remind our listeners, in our episode description, you can find links to Spotify and Apple Music for all the music we'll discuss this evening. It's all available on streaming this time. At the top of the description, there's a link also for the full episode playlist. You can get all of the music in one place, in one long list on Deezer. That's our preferred streaming platform. CD quality sound, a nice interface. You can also catch the podcast there. Look us up at username Adult Music Podcast. Now, if you don't see the full description, or you can't click on the links on whatever app you're listening to us on right now, you can always come over to our host, Podbean, PODBEAN.com. And everything's easy to follow there. Get all the episodes in chronological order. If you enjoy the podcast, please do follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you listen to us on. And if they have a ranking or review function, we'd appreciate giving us a ranking. Why not give us a 5-star ranking? It only takes a second.
No, definitely give us a 5-star ranking if you like us, because anything else is just going to bring us down the list. So.
Yeah, or write a review. That helps us get listed in the browsing category recommendations, helps us catch new listeners, which we appreciate. You can also find us on Facebook. We've got a Facebook page, although we got an announcement from them that said they're not going to have podcasts anymore.
I don't know what that means, though.
I think it might just be their hosting of the podcasts.
Yeah, I think we have a page there, and I think that page will stay up.
Yeah.
And, so
we'll find a workaround.
Check that out. Anyway. We posted a few things this week. I'm going to try to post more things.
We put some related video content and other humorous little things.
Anything humorous that comes up, I'll put up there.
Related to music during the week. So you can communicate there. We'd like to get some more people involved over there. You can also leave a message or comment. Just look us up, Adult Music Podcast on Facebook. And anything above and beyond that, if you want to get in touch with us directly with any comments or questions, you can always drop us an email message at adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com.
Yeah. Oh, incidentally, do you have any personal experience with woodwind players? Like, as I remember, we
have various experiences. I don't know what you're referring to.
What I mean is,
I think my first girlfriend was a clarinet player.
Okay. Yeah, I had a flute player girlfriend once.
Yeah.
But clarinets, it's funny because there was that kid in 5th grade, and then there was around here we had a professional clarinet player that I knew, and we went to his concert, and it started 45 minutes late because he couldn't warm the instrument up and get it in tune to his liking, and it just seemed like they're a fussy lot. He kind of kept unwinding the kind of string that holds the reed in and stuff, and just adjusting everything. It was really irritating. I don't know that, the thing is, I like the idea of like being a musician. I would have liked to have been one, but then I look at these people and I say, I don't know. I can't get this.
I would have left and gone to the bar
about
or
things.
Something, So
Say again?
I would have left and gone to the bar.
Well, you're a brass player, that's why,
45 minutes, no way.
The brass player is a little more, have a thing for the bar, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, but we deal with our own things. I remember once I had been conscripted to play. It was like, I don't know, it was some kind of parade, that ended up. It was in the winter, and it was like a memorial thing for a military thing. And there was a chaplain or someone giving this dedication, and he was kind of long-winded. And it was like below freezing outside, and I had to play like my buddy or some like military thing. When I put the horn to my lips, I think they actually froze onto my face, and I couldn't get a sound out of it. So brass players have their own things to deal with.
Yeah.
Aside from dodging what the horses left behind in the parade, if you march behind them.
Right.
So,
which often happens, huh? I guess.
I hate marching. I never liked that. So.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. I don't know.
That's one thing you have to do when you're a brass player. If you're a singer, you got to sing at all these weddings. You got to sing these goofy songs that they want you to sing and all that. But singers are kind of made for that. They like the spotlight.
Ham it up.
So.
Yep.
All right. Anyway, tonight, well, we're saving the clarinet for later in the classical era, but we do have woodwinds right at the beginning. The first album that we're doing tonight is one of our favorite composers on the... We should make a list, actually, on our site that says, things we love, things we hate. I'm going to start compiling that, I think.
That'd be fun. Yeah, we should do that.
But one of the things we both love, and it's got to be things we both love. It can't be just one of us is crazy about this. Right. It's just the podcast loves this. We both love the music of Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, and that has been the case since around the year 2012, when we heard Andreas Steyer's recording of C.P.E. Bach's keyboard concertos. He played it on the harpsichord, and it was a fantastic performance. It really just kind of gave us a look into his world. Like Steyer understood all the humor in the music and things like that. So we've been avidly listening to Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach albums as they came out ever since. And they're coming out more and more. He seems to be drawing the attention of musicians and hopefully audiences too. But the it's really musicians. They want to play his music, so they it's musicians that make music popular. It's not really audiences.
Yeah, he's got that really identifiable style and approach. You can almost always pick out his sort of little personality stamps and signature kind of things with his rhythms and the unexpected things that make his compositions, really unique and fun to listen to.
Usually, but not so much here. A little bit. Just a bit. This is a pretty interesting album, actually. Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's Sonatas for flute, and it says here Fortepiano. I guess it's a Fortepiano. Okay. Yeah. François Lazarevitch on the flute, and Justin Taylor, or someone we really like on this podcast, on the, I think, fortepiano, but the CD actually says pianoforte, which means a pianoforte is a piano. It's a modern piano. The full name of it in Italian is pianoforte, which means soft loud, because it can go soft and loud, which a harpsichord can't do.
This one doesn't sound really modern, though. It sounds...
No, it's an Erard from the 1840s, I think. I think. Wait, I'm thinking maybe I don't want to say that because I might be confusing recordings here. I can check. But yeah, it does sound like, it's something a little older. Now, there's also the word fortepiano, which people now use. This was not the case at the time. There's actually no such word as fortepiano. It was just made up recently. But critics or writers use it to identify a piano from the 19th century, the early to mid 19th century. They call it a fortepiano instead of a pianoforte, which would be the modern piano. Okay, in Italian. In English, we just cut the forte part out and just call it a piano, which actually sounds cool. I kind of like the word.
Piano, which in the certain southern states comes out as piani or something like that. You know. Oh, really? Wow.
He played the piani.
Piani? Mm.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere. I don't know. I'm trying to get this. Okay. No, actually, it's not an Erard. It's this piano is it was built in 2017, but it's after an older one. So it's hard to say, really. The thing is, I have the CD, and there are no pictures of the instruments, and the flute on this isn't a metal flute. It sounds like a wooden flute, but again, I didn't see it. I'm going by the sound. It does have a woody quality to it.
Yeah. I thought the piano has a rather dainty kind of quality to it on this recording.
Yeah, exactly. And it fits in pretty well here with this particular flute. It's not a modern flute, as we said. By the way, for those annoying people out there who ask me, how come the flute is a woodwind instrument? Because it's metal. Well, because it was originally wood. Okay, that's why. We just didn't change the name. All right, the original flutes were wooden flutes. They were like recorders, sort of. All right, anyway, getting on to this rather interesting album. It was really lovely. I liked it. And a little idiosyncratic, too. C.P.E. Bach himself wrote an essay on the true art of playing keyboard instruments that we these days read so that we know how to perform works from that era, like what was in style or things like that. He said that emotion came before everything else. So this is like the key to his music. Now, he doesn't mean emotion like Beethoven, where it's just roiling passion and things like that. But he meant emotion like every emotion, happy, sad, he included them all in his music, often in the same piece, which is what makes his music so interesting. He would often change moods on hairpin turns of harmony and odd pauses that led to unexpected harmonies. And remember, he lived at around Mozart's time, so as you can imagine, musical conservatives were horrified by his music. Of course, we're not. It sounds nice. Okay? Yeah. But those guys with the wigs, those wigs, those hairs were standing on end, even through the wigs.
You'd look good with one of those wigs on, I'd like to see you with one of those.
I don't have any hair, so I'd probably look okay with them. I'd kind of look... They make you look a little effeminate, though. I don't know.
A bit, yeah. Especially with
those. But that's what they wanted then, though, because they were gentlemen.
Jacket and a big white wig.
Yeah, the big wig. Anyway, we're entertained by these today and grateful for the emotions provided in our numbing world. So... You could get all the emotions all in one piece if you listen to C.P.E. Bach, but actually not in all of these. Now, the odd thing about this is this album is that the pieces for flute and keyboard are all trio sonatas. So that means there was a solo instrument. It was usually a violin in this case. So these have been sort of played by the flute here. And then there was a keyboard, and then there was a basso continuo, which was usually some kind of cello or viola da gamba that would play the bass notes. On this album, the piano, the keyboard, the fortepiano, is playing both the piano part.
He does it all.
Yeah, and the basso continuo part. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because you can hear him distinguishing between the two when he plays, because he plays in this is Justin Taylor. He plays in this sort of heavily in a staccato style, which he doesn't need to do on a fortepiano. It can play legato. Legato would be connecting all the notes like in a melody, like a flowing melody. Staccato means it's just the notes are separated.
Well, I get an overall more of a harpsichord type approach to his playing here.
He is a harpsichordist. That's probably
and especially he gets some impressive bursts of notes, like you would get on the harpsichord. But then, like you say, there are some sections where you would expect a more legato kind of connection of notes, but he doesn't do that.
Right.
And it must be his decided upon approach, and it's not bad. It's just unique, and what's really impressive is that he has these different parts going on at the same time, and they're often, quite different rhythmically and moving in different directions. But he's able to, take those two separate parts for different instruments, and makes the piano parts really interesting to listen to here.
Yeah, I mentioned staccato. It's bringing back a memory of an old piano teacher of mine who told me that staccatos are notated with like a dot over the note, okay? And the piano teacher told me that you have to play those like the keys are hot. So you're like, ow. You kind of. So that's a really short note because you're just pulling your hand away from it really fast. But that's not really true. That wasn't really good advice because staccato can be, they can be held a little bit. They just have to be disconnected from each other. That's really all it really means. And that's what he's giving us here. He's not giving us the, this keyboard is too hot for me to touch kind of feeling. The things that stay with you. Oh, man. Anyway.
I've got one like that. When playing the trumpet, I had a trumpet teacher who told me, imagine you have a small, delicate Christmas ornament in the front of your mouth and you're blowing air around it. So
then you're, of course, thinking, why would you do that?
Why would you do that? Yeah, exactly. So,
wouldn't you just back off and look at it? So some of the ideas these people came up with was really funny. I've got other piano stories coming up. Anyway. The first trio sonata here is actually a pretty conservative one, as is the last one we're going to hear on the album. So the two pieces of bread sandwiching this program. This one was adapted in 1747. Now remember, Johann Sebastian Bach, CPE's father, the great Johann Sebastian Bach, died in 1750. So this is 3 years before his death. And he made a famous visit to Potsdam to visit his son, CPE, and to play for King Frederick of Prussia, who then I think set him the theme for the musical offering, which he then, I think, I hope I got this right. Okay. Anyway, I'm pretty sure the musical offering. I'm doing this off the top of my head, people. I know I'm a scholar, but I don't read these books every day. So he played for King Frederick of Prussia. This is a really famous event in music history. And this was adapted from an earlier violin sonata that CPE wrote in 1731. And it sounds kind of a lot like his father, Johann Sebastian. There are flute sonatas by Johann Sebastian Bach, and to be honest, it would be hard to tell the difference because this kind of continues and operates like a Johann Sebastian Bach flute sonata. So this is a pretty conservative piece. It has a lot of Baroque style to it, but there's no problem with that. It's very appealing. Okay, and we hear the keyboard first. It sounds close to a harpsichord in this piece, actually in general, really. Let me see what I have here. The flute is far more present than the piano sound on this album, but I have no problem with that. You can hear both. The piano is definitely audible. And Lazarevitch's tone, he's playing the flute, is full-bodied and appealing and very forward. I like Taylor's playing here, and especially the way he outlines the downward bass figures. Now, remember, he has to play the basso continuo part, the bass line, which would have been a separate instrument. So he's playing both parts here, and he really goes out of his way to make sure you hear those bass notes with the staccato and just kind of by just accenting them a little harder than the other notes. So I was aware of this throughout this entire album. It was no problem. I really appreciated that, but it was something that drew attention to itself just because it was so unusual. So listen for that. Second movement, largo, which means very slow. The fortepiano twinkles while the flute plays staccato figures at the beginning. I wonder if his teacher told him that, the place where you put your lips is really hot. Just blow into it quickly. I think that would be the opposite. You'd want to put the fire out, I think. Anyway, it's very attractive playing. Sorry to distract you with that comment, but listeners, okay, this reverts to more legato playing as the movement goes on. And again, Taylor, very sensitive to the bass line's movement. Make sure we hear it. The imitations by the harpsichord of the flute's melodies are also clearly outlined, so they really stand out. This is enjoyable and totally chilled out all the way through, to add in a I think C.P.E. Bach would have liked to have heard that his music was chill.
Yeah, that's what the C stood for.
Sounds like a cool guy. He had a sense of humor. He was Mozart really liked him and his music. So there you go. Mozart was a practical joker himself. Anyway, third movement, Allegro. This particular movement was newly written for the trio, so the first two movements came from a 4-movement violin sonata from 1731, and this third movement was written in 1747.
That makes sense to me, because this is, I thought the first two, like you were describing, they were more rather generically Baroque in style, but I picked up a much more distinctive CPE kind of style that I recognize from his other music in the third movement alone. And so I thought that stood out as being more identifiable.
Yeah, another unusual thing about this is that the first movement usually is pretty fast. It's a sonata, but in this case it's allegretto, which would be more like a second movement. So he lifted the second movement from his violin sonata for this work. So there's no fast first movement. No worries there, though. Anyway, this particular third movement is lively. It's the only lively movement in this work, and it's taken in a well-etched, I called it, precise manner. Now, when musicians play a rhythm like precisely, it generally means that there's not much excitement in it. And this isn't really terribly exciting, but it doesn't really detract from the liveliness. It's still a very lively movement. I think it falls short of exciting, though. Both players are concerned that you hear all the connections between the melodic figures they're playing, and that makes the performance really intellectually satisfying. Taylor especially does a lot to make sure we're aware of all the repeated notes. There are a lot of them, hitting them firmly as the flute flutters out the melody above. So there's a lot of like dun 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 in the harpsichord or the fortepiano. You'll notice it when you hear it. Okay, moving on. Trio Sonata in D major. Wat Quen, 83. I should really look up who where this Wat Quen designation comes from. Like who is it? Is this somebody's name? It's a catalog of C.P.E. Bach's works, but I'm just wondering who Wat Quen was. Okay, this is an alternative version of C.P.E.'s Wat Quen 151 Trio Sonata, so it's just a different version of that. The first movement is Allegro un poco, so it starts kind of fast. It's got a lot of repeated notes in the keyboard bass, and originally played by basso continuo, may even have been held, who knows. And I like the way Taylor handles it here, and really throughout the album. This piece has a Baroque flavor to it, a little more conservative for C.P.E. We're hearing a side of him that probably was the most familiar before we heard, but we're familiar with his lighter, more jokey side, and we're not hearing that so much here. I don't want to say yet, but we don't really hear that on this album. I'll get to the one strange piece on it later. He can be really unconventional, but not here. There are a few appealing imitations between the two instruments as well, always intellectually satisfying when the ear picks up the connections between the solo instrument and the accompanying instrument. Yeah.
The counter lines are great.
They are.
The interplay is really, this is not just keyboard accompanying a flute. There's a high level of interaction and trading involvement in the way it's written, which makes for exciting listening.
Yeah, Taylor, by the way, again, like I said, he doesn't play legato on this. He's deliberate and clear in his articulation of all the lines, and he plays mostly in a staccato manner, and he leaves it to the flute to do the legato melody. Speaking of legato melodies, the second movement, Largo, has a lyrical melody on the flute to start out, and the piano line takes the melody after the flute's initial statement. The flute provides harmonic elements at that part and drops out for a few measures, then retakes the main line. There's imitation again. I'm starting to catch on to Lazarevich's approach here. He'll clip his melodies at the end to indicate that they're finished, and as a result, we get a clear sense of where the melodies, as he hears them, begin and end, because you can just keep playing, and sort of and his sometimes staccato approach echoes the piano's approach. So I think when he's doing that, he's deliberately trying to imitate the piano's approach. So the approaches of the two are very distinguished, and when they start copying each other, it's because they want you to sort of notice that they're sort of in line with each other. Taylor has a lot of sensitivity on this recording, which is what draws us to his harpsichord recordings. He's a very sensitive player. I really appreciate hearing him. The third movement, Allegro, is a lively movement with some sudden pauses characteristic of CPE Bach. We love those sudden jamming on the brakes that CPE does. We wouldn't like it if he was driving a car, but in music it's really fun. This is the kind of thing that would have driven musical conservatives of his era crazy. Also, lots of accented repeated notes in the piano bass that Taylor accents. The movement, due to the more staccato approach of the keyboard, doesn't come across as quirky, but is highly appealing. And this is despite some built-in quirks. All the quirks are charming in this case, which is quite a trick, I have to say. As in the first trio we heard, the liveliness of this movement comes through despite the duo's careful articulation of key melodies and bass notes. So they still manage a liveliness despite paying so much attention to articulation, because you can sort of concentrate too much and just lose the big picture. They never do that. The liveliness has to do with maintaining a very steady pulse that never slackens. So you get this sort of tension, a sort of tense feeling. Again, it's not an exciting performance as it could be, but very satisfying and charming. So yeah, I didn't feel like, so in other words, the rhythm doesn't slacken. So it doesn't like feel like it's sort of, the tension is just being let loose. The tension is there, but they're just not really, going for it like some musicians would. Okay, it's sort of a careful, it's an attentive approach, let's say, and very appealing one. I don't mean that to sound. I just want to give you an idea of what you're going to hear. All right, the third work is a sonata for solo flute. Okay, in A minor, Watt-Quen 132. Okay, now Lazarevitch says in the booklet note that he wanted to follow CPE Bach's spirit and vary a lot of the written material in the repeats, as CPE Bach himself did in solo keyboard performances. So you'll hear the material played straight, and then in the repeat there'll be a lot of ornamentation, and who knows, they may even change certain things. And I've had piano teachers tell me to do that. I think the idea originally comes from CPE Bach. It may have come from Johann Sebastian himself through CPE. Okay, and we know this about him, about CPE Bach, from his written out divergences in his keyboard sonatas. So we have evidence of this. Of course, none of us have ever heard him, but there could be written reports of the time too of how he played. The piece has linear counterpoint. I really like these solo instruments that are playing like counterpoint to themselves. It's a real trick. Like you have to play like two different lines, make it sound like two different lines going against each other. Low notes form an imaginary bass line or pedal point, and some phrases are close to recitative in opera in the first movement. First movement, Poco Adagio, so it starts very slowly. The slow tempo allows one to separate out the different voices. I have that in quotation marks because it's all one instrument that CPE is using. Lazarevitch gives the bass notes a slight honk and strong staccato attack to make them stand out and contrast to the legato melodic material. This is really nice. It's almost like he's playing two lines and he's giving them two different sound qualities so that you, the listener, can follow them easily. There's some surprising sudden chord changes and false cadences. I am a big fan of the false cadence, which we don't hear anymore in music because musicians now don't use keys in classical music. Yeah. Anyway, the movement is ternary, so ABA, so you're going to have a repeating section at the end. And on the repeat, Lazarevitch does indeed add a lot more. It sounds like there's a coda at the end, unless the material is so decorated that it didn't notice it was the same. I can't really tell. But very satisfying movement. I really do love when soloists like a flautist are able to command attention, playing a single note at a time. So it's really amazing. Yeah. Allegro, second movement, which is rather unusual. Usually the middle movement is the slow movement. This movement is more dancey and rhythmic with lots of figuration. I should repeat we should probably write these out somewhere. Figuration is melodic material that's too fast or too kind of machine-like or instrument-like to be sung. We call that figuration. So it's not really a singable it's not singable melodic material. So you can think of your favorite Chopin, piano runs or something like that as figuration. Anyway. A repeat of the open material is taken, and Lazarevitch does throw in some nice ornamentation on the repeat, maintaining a gorgeous flute sound throughout. He sounds great. I really do like his sound.
Yeah, they've got just the right amount of room reverb here to keep the presence for a solo instrument. He has a benefit of some echo to blend the notes together in a nice sustain. So, right.
So you do hear that room ambience, even though he sounds like he's fairly close to the microphone. There's distance between them so that you can pick up his sound. He's not like blocking out the whole hall sound, but it's a nice balance. Good work to the engineers here. This work sort of reminds me of something Johann Sebastian would do, actually, his father. Not Lazarevitch's father, C.P.E. Bach's father. This particular movement doesn't have so many of the occasional quirks that the opening movement does, but there are one or two, and here Lazarevitch underplays them to focus on the melodic material. So you'll have to have some sharp ears to hear those. The third movement, well, you have to be paying attention, really. The third movement, Allegro, is another lively movement, though this one is a bit more fitful, with lots of pauses between phrases in the opening theme. We can hear two voices in dialogue. Now, remember, there's only one person playing, right? So he's sort of creating this illusion of these two voices.
Yeah, he's got these like double sheets of sound going on. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Let me be clear too. There aren't two sounds happening at the same time ever. It's him jumping from line to line, and he distinguishes between both of them well with his sound and attack. We can hear the two voices in dialogue, a lower and a higher. There are occasional subtle, slight vibrato or some kind of weird shaking of the tone on repeated notes by Lazarevitch that caught my ear. I think it has to do with him cutting off the tone, that same technique, but it really kind of jumped out at me. I think it's the attack on repeated notes that I liked here. A beautiful performance all the way through, appealing in every way, and a nice slight flurry on the flute to end the piece, a little note flurry.
You get a sense of this piece reminds me of like a perpetual motion melody machine. It's like you got to feel like C.P.E. Bach could have kept this going forever and just say, what am I going to do next? Just keep listening. And the creativity, it's just sort of like unraveling constant melody lines that could go on forever out of his imagination.
Yeah, he does seem to be one of these guys, probably like his dad, who just had these non-stop ideas and could probably just keep going forever, really amazing. All right. We get to the next piece, which is a trio sonata again. This one's in C major. Wattquen 149. I should say Wattquen. I should say it in German. I'm so terrible with this. Okay, all based on newly composed material by CPE. First movement, Allegro di molto. The keyboard comes in as a surprise after being so mesmerized by the previous piece. Okay, because we've just heard flute, and now all of a sudden, bang, we're back to the keyboard, so it's a little surprising to the ear. We get a lot of those repeated bass notes that Taylor accents. This is Justin Taylor. This is a pretty lively movement. There's a lot of echoing of material between instruments, and the interplay here is predictably on point. Really good. Taylor's sound on the Fortepiano is completely dry. No pedals seem to be used. The Fortepiano had pedals. The movement is brief at 3 minutes long. This is a pretty short piece, actually. Second movement, Andante. We hear some pedal from the piano here as he plays the opening slow lyrical theme. The flute picks it up and varies it a bit. Taylor again has a lot of repeated notes to play in the bass. This is because it was originally a basso continuo part, and he makes them stand out. These notes underpin the harmony. Third movement, Allegretto, is a lively finale with a busy flute in the opening. The melody eventually gets passed on to the keyboard, and the flute echoes it. Next, we get to the solo piano work, Fantasia, in F sharp minor, Wattquen 67. Well, if you're enjoying this album and feeling really comfortable in your chair, this is where you're going to start getting queasy. This is the Fantasia. This is real CPE Bach stuff, and I don't mean in the humorous way, but in the this was more like what we heard on the Marc-Andre Amlan recording back in January, right, when we did his piano sonatas.
I'll tell you my final comment when we get to the end of this.
Okay.
I just saw it again, made myself laugh.
Okay. This is a continuous sequence of contrasting sections. So it's almost like it's in 3 sections, but basically it's all one section. And you can kind of think of it as you're walking through this long sort of hallway, and it's got like maybe differently decorated things on the wall at different colored lights in each section of it. And it's just really weird and disorienting. Okay? I think of maybe Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Mask of the Red Death, with all the different colored rooms, maybe something like that, for the way this plays out. A story, incidentally, that CPE wouldn't know because it was written 100 years or 50 years after he died or something like that. Okay. A continuous sequence of contrasting sections and a tonality that gives a strange, melancholy mood. That's from the booklet notes. Much of the score lacks bar lines. This is also from the booklet notes. I didn't see the score, meaning there wouldn't be a clear downbeat. One musical theoretician, I thought this was funny, Johan Dalene, characterized the key of F sharp minor as misanthropic.
Wow.
I'd like to sit him down and ask him why he thinks so.
It's hard to read, but...
hating people.
Yeah.
Misanthropic. I think I'll write a piece with that, that describes my hatred of the human race. I'll put it in F sharp minor. I don't know. I never heard that before.
I said this piece has bipolar disorder.
It could very well, yeah.
It keeps going to opposite extremes, and the more and more as it progresses.
Yeah, I want to point out to listeners, too, that this is what CPE Bach is all about. We're hearing all the emotions as we walk down this long musical corridor. The goal here for the pianist is to give the impression of spontaneously improvising the music with a heightened expressivity. This has to sound improvised, otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, and Justin Taylor does a nice job of that. Let's get into some adagio. Okay, well, the first track. Now, there are 3 tracks on this. The entire piece is divided into 3 tracks, but it should be thought of as one long continuous movement with lots of sections.
It doesn't, like the first one doesn't resolve itself. It sort of just goes right into the next movement.
Right. Okay, so right away, we get into some dark key areas right at the beginning. There's a lot of emotional variety, to say the least, almost immediately in this 2-minute and 30-second track. It's quiet, then suddenly loud, plaintive, then suddenly anxious. Taylor picks up on all these emotions well. The rhythm consists of a bass note followed by 3 repeating chords, like dun, 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 which the right hand occasionally picks up. There are a lot of quick changes. The allegretto is only about 30 seconds long. It consists of rapid scalar figuration, all of it pretty loud. We go to the second track of this recording. There's really no transition. We go directly into a dark-sounding minor key. The melody is a bit disjointed due to the quick textural changes. Taylor is alert to all of these and brings musicality out of material that may not sound as musical in other hands. Yeah, that's because he sounds like he's improvising it, so he's sort of prepared a way to make this sound spontaneous. It really won't work otherwise if it sounds studied, It's a stark, disjointed movement that requires a deep musical understanding to put it across, and Taylor has that. We hear the bass note followed by 3 repeated chords from the opening make another appearance, then a sudden reversion to the mood of this movement's opening with some flourishes thrown in. There's a sudden stop with no cadence at the end of this section with a long pause, and then we get to the third track in this piece, which is track 15 on the CD or the or you're streaming. And we're back at the beginning with the bass notes and chords. So the album has set up its tracks so that we can kind of follow the pattern. So the third section, the third track of this recording brings us back to the beginning music. Bass note and chords again. This breaks up in a new direction with descending repeated notes. There's a pretty impressive long scalar flourish at 1 minute 40 seconds that ends by sounding like something out of Schoenberg. He has these unresolved short figures, and Schoenberg used these a lot, except that he was using them as his means of expression in his 12-tone music. CPE Bach has these in a traditional harmony, but he's using the same type of figures. And I kind of wonder if Schoenberg got this idea from music of this era, especially by CPE. Something more romantic emerges at around 2 minutes and 15 seconds, putting CPE ahead of his time. Or that's just how Taylor interprets it. I can't really tell. Then we go back to some quick figures. A lot of material sounds unrelated, but Taylor does exceptionally well to make it all hold together. This is a pretty disturbing work for its time. I bet people couldn't sleep after hearing this back in the day. Maybe CPE, he played it for the ladies. They couldn't sleep, and then he made his way to their bedroom and said, "Oh, let me keep you company."
I don't know. This actually kind of reminds me of a girl I used to date, but
oh boy, that says a lot.
Not the clarinet player, but
in what way? Can you describe that, or that's all you want to say about that?
These frequent changes of moods.
Oh man,
yeah, unresolved cadences and breathtaking tempos.
Yeah, listening to this piece might remind you of relationships you might want to forget. There is something really bipolar about it.
Yep.
Okay. All right, but no worries. The very last piece on the album, track 16 to 18, is a conservative trio sonata in B minor, Vatkven 143. And this is the other of the two works adapted in 1747, the year J.S. Bach made his famous visit to Potsdam, from an earlier violin sonata from 1731. And they sound very Johann Sebastian Bach-like. The Allegro reassures the listener after the previous piece, which, boy, if he had ended on that. I think actually Amlan on his double CD CP Bach album does leave us in a nightmarish place at the end, as he would. Okay. There's a very pretty flute melody, and gets a lively accompaniment. The flute is back, of course. Gets a lively accompaniment from the keyboard, which echoes its melody at times. Beautifully articulated. The Adagio has a minor-sounding melody in the flute, and gently and lamentingly accompanied by the keyboard. Sad-sounding movement. And the Presto, the last movement, is a very lively, bouncing 6/8 rhythm, sounding jig-like.
Yeah, all those triplets bouncing around in there.
Yeah, they bounce in those Baroque and classical era works. The flute is often playing triplets itself, right along with the keyboard. So, yeah, you hear these right up front. They're not disguising them, which can be done. The keyboard is really keeping the rhythm in this one. They echo each other, as is common in these works. It's a light, lively send-off for an enjoyable and occasionally challenging program. The challenging work is the Fantasia, so make sure you hear that. I found the music on this album to be closer to CPE's dad, J.S., Johann Sebastian's music, than to his quirkier stuff. Thought there's some of that too, especially the solo keyboard Fantasia, which really stands out on this album. Lazarevitch is a stylish player on the flute with a gorgeous sound. He partners well with Taylor. The both of them sound great together. Both of them are on the same page interpretatively and stylistically. Beautifully recorded too. Balances are well realized, and I want to give the engineer a shout out. Who is he? I should always write these down. Olivier Rosset is the recording producer, and I'm not seeing the engineer's name. Oh well. Production. Nope, not getting it. Oh well. They didn't list him. Maybe the producer.
It's on Alpha label too.
Say again?
It's on
It's
Alpha.
on the Alpha label.
Yes.
That, Boy, I didn't mention that at the beginning. Okay, so there you go.
Yeah,
Recommended.
I like this one a lot. As you say, it leans more traditional Baroque style, much more in the shadow of his father. But we get these peaks of more of his more quirky works, especially with the F sharp minor Fantasia piece. The flute is engaging. I like the full tone on it. A lot of flute can get up into that higher register that can be a little bit fatiguing, but you won't find that on this recording, especially on the solo flute passage. The warmth of the tones and in the lower register that he gets out is quite endearing, and the sonics, that sort of room reverb that makes the sustain of the notes hang out, makes it really easy to listen to. And then Taylor's keyboard approach is fun to listen to too. Like I say, he takes a kind of a staccato harpsichord kind of approach, but his rhythms are really tight, almost like his fingers are, spring-loaded. And some of the faster passages are really technically amazing, almost like he's going to spontaneously combust if he played any faster on them. So there's a lot of good energy in there. Not overdone, I should say. And some of the slower passages are indeed rather kind of calming. And so you get the nice contrast in there. But a good listen, and any fan of CPE Bach music will enjoy this, as well as Taylor's impressive keyboard work. So, yeah, a good Baroque recording to start out with.
Yeah, Baroque, classical. Hard to say.
What do they call it?
He's really on the borderline here.
In the middle.
Because there is a lot of Baroque sounding work on it. I should mention too the wooden flute, though, if it gets up into its high end, the edge isn't as like cutting as it is on like the modern metal flute, I don't think, which is a much brighter sounding instrument. Although I guess Mozart would have heard flutes like this and he hated them. He really didn't like the flute because of its high end. He thought it was really harsh sounding to his ears. That didn't stop him from writing some great flute works, though. Oh man. All right, so we're on to our second classical recording, and we're still not at the clarinet yet because we have violin concertos by Carl Nielsen, one of my favorite composers, and Jean Sibelius, one of my other favorite composers, at least as far as symphonies go.
Yeah, I think, and this recording kind of even made me remember that, I think Nielsen is my absolute favorite symphonic composer. And Yeah, the colors of the orchestra, and especially, using enough brass. If you're a brass player, you always want to hear the brass. And what's nice about this is his composing for the orchestral parts in concertos carries over a lot of the same kind of feel that he uses, in his symphonies. He's not just writing for the solo instrument here. So there's a lot of satisfying orchestral power in this work.
I have a special liking for Nielsen's orchestral music myself. I remember the first time I ever heard the Fourth Symphony, subtitled "The Inextinguishable." I remember I was in a state of really low despair, things weren't going well, and I put that on, and it just lifted me right out of that. It was almost like a giant hand pulling me out of this hole, and it was permanent. I never really felt that again. It's just it's the power of music right there. So I've always been interested in Nielsen's music and have read up quite a bit on him just because of that one experience.
I just thought of something too. It's kind of a common point that ties this with CPE Bach in that as a orchestral composer, Nielsen has that same quality of sort of rapidly changing keys or moving to an unexpected place more so than other composers do, which can make his music a bit disconcerting at times, but it's always very exciting and full of these dynamic changes whenever he's, using the full orchestra and moving through things. So he has that kind of unconventional and unpredictableness to his music as a character. That's a kind of a common point.
Right. One of Nielsen's whole narrative strategies is to start in one key and he'll end in a completely different key, and he'll give you hints about what that's going to be, but you really don't know unless you've heard the piece before. You don't really know what it is, so you're kind of you really don't know where you're going.
Yeah,
it's
you're
kind of
always carried
exciting,
away.
you know?
I like it.
I do too. Beethoven kind of started that idea, C minor to C major, in the Fifth Symphony, but he never went from one key to and ended in a completely other one. That was a later development. So anyway, our soloist here is someone who the podcast has talked about before,
right.
Johan Dalene on the violin. He's only 21 years old, and we heard him on the Nordic Rhapsody album that we talked about on August 2nd last year on episode 25, which was called From Moravia Through Scandinavia to Brazilian Sands. I'm really glad we got away from those long titles.
It's too long, yeah.
Although now we're getting too much alliteration. I kind of...
Yeah.
I like all writers like alliteration, but the problem is it's overused. I feel like we have to get away from it a little bit, but we've got some good alliterations coming up, I think, so we'll keep with it for a while. We just can't resist, you know. It's just that childish thing. You have to just do this. Okay, we are better than the American press at alliteration, though. I just want to put that out there. Oh gosh,
yeah, it's pretty bad these days.
They're the worst. Yeah, they call themselves writers. Unbelievable. Anyway. Nielsen Sibelius Violin Concerto. This is on the Beast label, and if you have the physical medium, it's an SACD. So if you have the equipment to play that, you're in for a treat. Although, kind of.
Kind of.
All right. Yeah, this album is it's okay, really. I'm a big fan of both works, first of all, I just want to say. The Nielsen work is, I just talked about how much I love Nielsen, but this violin concerto isn't as familiar to me as the Sibelius, because the Sibelius is a really famous piece that all the great virtuosos have played, and the Nielsen is really only just starting to get traction, like more soloists are starting to play it. Anyway, we start with the Nielsen violin concerto, and it starts with a movement. Now, it's in two movements, and he did this again in his Fifth Symphony. This one was a little earlier, I think, than that. Okay, so this is probably the first go-around for this two-movement, and each movement has kind of two sections in it, so it has this feeling of four movements, sort of, you know?
Right.
Or they're not four moves, but it's like there's an introduction and then a main section and then another introduction and a main section. This one starts with a preludium, which really should say Bach to you, okay? Because it's a title that Bach and really Baroque composers used. There's an opening chord, and the violin comes in with some impressive double stopping right away. I'm reintroduced here to Dalene's very sweet, and on this recording, very thin tone. I don't really remember his tone being this thin on the Nordic Rhapsody album. I think he was recorded much closer on that one. This recording is super low and needs to be turned up, which is often the case with Beast SACDs. I have no problem with that. I'll turn it up. The recording itself sounds gorgeous, but a little distant, I think. The cadence into the second theme is led into by Dalene with an incredible quietness, and I think this is achieved because of the distance from the microphone. But it's a pretty remarkable sound. Make sure there's no... You're not listening to this when you're in traffic or if you live in an apartment that has traffic outside it. It's very beautiful. In fact, he gets an impressive whispering, quiet tone through most of this section. Gorgeous legato, too. He's a great player, really. I'm also enjoying the clarity with which the individual orchestral instruments are captured, particularly in the bass end. Pizzicati impact impressively, if you've got the volume up, and at 3:39 and afterwards, 3 minutes 39 seconds point, you can test it there. The DSD recording, which I listened to on DSD, and spacious. If you're listening to the CD layer, you're not going to get the DSD part. And spaciousness of the surround just make the music more enjoyable. Individual instruments have a nice rounded quality. The bass is especially well captured. And again, at 6 minutes and 15 seconds, Dalene's sound is impossibly quiet. It's impressive, but I'm wondering if this would come across in a live performance. It enchants on the recording. This is a pretty tranquil section of the movement, so there's not much else to say about it. Then we get to the Allegro Cavalleresco section. I really don't know what that means. Cavallo in Italian is a horse. So maybe it means like horse-like. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Riding a horse didn't sound like that,
I don't
though.
think I've seen that one described before.
Yeah. This comes on much louder. There's a big extreme between quiet and loud in this recording.
I guess it means chivalrous.
Crazy. You mean chivalrous?
Chivalrous.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Cavaliere. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in this case, yeah. Okay, I get it. So it doesn't mean cavallo, because I saw the two L's. And I thought cavallo, horse. But yeah, chivalrous at knight. He would ride a horse. I guess the words are related. Cavaliere would be the the knight or something like that. This comes on much louder. Chords marking the beginning of each measure as the violin solos. This is much longer than the first section. It's 13 minutes. It's almost 14 minutes long, this section of the score. Dalene's sweet tone here gets some vibrato, but it still sounds rather thin. It registers on the recording. I wish the soloists were more up front, though, I have to say. At this point, I'm noticing that. The balance has some more blending with the orchestra, which is not unsatisfying, really. The engineer is sort of making him sort of a part of the orchestra that stands out, I guess, as opposed to like a soloist with an orchestra like accompanying him. We hear a lot of repeated notes before melodic ideas are launched into, with the orchestra repeating a motif, which is a favorite technique of Nielsen. He does it in a lot of his symphonies. By 6 minutes and 8 seconds, I'm hearing phrases that would find another profile in the Fourth Symphony, my favorite. Dalene has a cadenza at around the 6 minute and 30 second mark before the recapitulation of the opening material of the movement, which is unusual. Usually the cadenza comes before the ending cadence. Incidentally, Sibelius does the same thing in his concerto. Maybe it's a Nordic thing.
Before their fingers got too cold, they wanted to...
Yeah, they wanted to get it over faster. Anyway, that could be. Dalene is suitably athletic here. If his sound isn't completely present. Again, I keep saying this, he sounds far away and quiet. He's more melodic and lyrical at 7 minutes and 45 seconds, and this cadenza goes on for some time. The recapitulation comes about 3 minutes later at 9 minutes and 35 seconds and starts with the beginning of track 2. We hear the opening violin material again from track 2, not sounding much different here. And this is going to be an issue, I think, with Dalene's playing. He doesn't vary the material much. Like, the whole repeat is kind of taken in the same mood as we heard it the first time. He handles the athletic passages well, especially those leading to the final cadence. Again, I could have done with more presence in his sound, and I think that's a fault of the recording. Second movement, which is the third track, Poco Adagio. Again, it's in 2 sections. This has a lovely, slow woodwind opening with a plaintive English horn playing the main melodic material. The violin comes in after a minute with, again, a sweet but thin tone, full of lovely vibrato. There's a large variation in piano and forte in this recording. The loud parts are pretty loud, but the quiet parts are very quiet. This entire movement is in the quiet range and is tranquil in mood. I should say this entire section. The fourth track, the second part of the second movement, is a rondo, which is a repeating theme. There's no cadence to end the previous section. It resolves into the, or maybe that is the cadence, it resolves into the theme of this section, with its rondo theme taken rather slowly and carefully, which I think takes something of its energy away. I think this kind of shortchanges us after what we've already heard. Dalene is going for something lyrical here, less than dance-like, which is what the movement invites. It wants to be dancey. He's understated in his playing here, and possibly really throughout the whole work, but I'm really noticing it here. This section should have more movement to it. At 6 minutes and 40 seconds, Dalene gets another cadenza, played with virtuosity but not much energy. He goes for the lyrical whenever he can. I did like his odd pastoral sound in a droning bass, pizzicato, and double-stopped chord after 7 minutes and 30 seconds. He does these all one after the other. It's really cool. This section of the concerto as a whole, though, is too slack for my taste. Dalene never varies the rondo theme, which makes it rather dull. And that's going to be an issue with his playing on also the Sibelius with me, because he has that sweet tone, and that's it. He doesn't really vary the tone much. Mm-hmm. And when you have long movements, you really need to do something to keep the listener interested. And you can vary your tone, change your phrasing. There are all sorts of little tricks that musicians have. He's got that beautiful tone. He's just showing it off all the way through. Okay, on to Sibelius. Violin Concerto in D minor, Opus 47, one of the big war horses for violin players. This starts Allegro moderato. It's a very long movement, 16 minutes. It has this quiet, shimmering orchestral opening, which Dalene solos over with a gossamer tone, maybe because he's far away again. I've heard all kinds of different approaches to this, and this one's nice. He plays this sweetly, which is predictable. I feel like he doesn't have much variety in his tone, as I said. We've heard this sound throughout the previous Nielsen concerto. This movement is taken a bit slowly, as though to draw out the sweet lyricism of the themes, which are definitely present. The high note at 1 minute 50 seconds is intoned beautifully, but there's no excitement in it. You don't really feel like the violin is going up for something really exciting. He just kind of plays it beautifully. The sweeping, double-stopped romantic theme at 4 minutes is gorgeous, but doesn't register due to the quietness of the violin in the mix, or the actual quietness of the violin itself. You could kind of tell at this point in the recording I was getting a bit annoyed. And it's not because the Sibelius is any worse than the Nielsen. It's because I had already heard the Nielsen, and I'm kind of hearing more of the same approach, and I think I'm getting kind of annoyed by that. If you reverse them, the Nielsen would be the piece that annoys you, I think, if you program them backwards. There's an early cadenza, again at 7 minutes and 30 seconds, of this almost 17-minute movement. This is really early. Dalene is lyrical here, which seems to be his go-to style. The cadenza is close to 3 minutes long. Then the orchestra comes back at around 10 minutes and repeating the opening material. Now, keep in mind, there's still 7 minutes of this to go. That's a lot. So there's going to be a coda, you can almost guess, starting at about the 15-minute mark, where the music livens up and heads towards a big climax. Nice orchestral detail in the woodwinds around 15 minutes and 40 seconds. The final cadence doesn't come across terribly emphatically. I'm really amazed at how underplayed this movement has been. It's a little disappointing. Second movement, Adagio di molto. Woodwinds start this movement too. This is Sibelius uses the woodwinds to evoke the Finnish natural environment, a lot of trees, that kind of thing. He gives it almost a mystical quality, like this kind of spirits in the trees or something like that. Okay. Anyway, there's really beautiful brass just before the violin enters at about 50 seconds. The violin plays its lyrical theme, which his tone is very appropriate here. Upwards creeping pizzicati bass appear after 2 minutes, reminding me that this work was written shortly after the Second Symphony, with its famous pizzicati bass opening to the second movement. To be honest, the whole movement goes by without much variation from the soloist. It's all beautifully played, but it doesn't really engage the listener's attention. There's no real variety in it. Third movement, Allegro ma non tanto. This is the final movement. This movement is a real challenge for the violinist. This is probably why violinists like to play it. They get to show off. It's virtuosic display all the way through. Lots of double stopping at the beginning. And here, Dalene has to show us something, and thankfully he does. He maintains his exquisite tone, through the challenges and pulls the movement off. But I feel like he's too careful to generate any real electricity. A lot of the passage work sounds prosaic, and the movement is taken at a fractionally slower tempo than we're used to hearing from the great performances of this work. Yeah, violinists, this is a hard movement to play, and great violinists will often just go for it and play it at a high tempo, and you're just wowed by the end. Not the case here, though. I like his harmonics, Dalene's harmonics at 5 minutes, smoothly and sweetly taken, but yeah, even the approach to the ending cadence doesn't generate excitement. So, in conclusion, these are certainly good performances, but I didn't get much musical excitement out of them. There's too much of the same tone, as though Dalene is showing off the beauty of his tone, and it is a beautiful tone, at the expense of expression. The playing is too careful, and that goes for the orchestra too. No sparks fly, although there is beauty of tone from the orchestra as well. Okay, it's a nice recording that way. The performances rather bring the works too close to the earth.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's 21 years old.
Yeah, he's got a long career ahead of him, so.
Yeah,
and he's a great player. So
yeah, it does kind of make you wonder if they're, with recording these very young musicians, they're putting too much of a load on them, to
I think he's Finnish or Dane. I don't remember, but he's this is really his music, and I can see why he would want to play it at such a.
I mean, I sensed what was the one last year, Nordic
Rhapsody, but that was with a pianist.
So it's nice that he wants to play this sort of Scandinavian repertoire, but I don't want to expect too much from someone 21, especially as we're getting up there in our own ages. I'm sure that he can only grow in terms of expression. I felt the same thing about the thinness of tone. Maybe he does have a sweet and a very pretty, appealing tone, but it may be small, or it could just be due to the recording, as you say. I felt it was somewhat improved in the Sibelius, like it was a little bit closer to the microphone, maybe. I did notice, because the Sibelius, there's so many recordings of this, all the great violinists have recorded this. The Nielsen should be recorded more. I felt, there was a sort of carefulness to the approach, so it's somewhat measured, never sacrificing the beauty of tone for any extra sort of expression, but maybe leaning too much on the safe side, as you say. And there's so many recordings to compare it to. But yeah, overall, not a bad recording, and certainly sonically satisfying. It's a good recording with huge dynamic range. As you said, the softs of the soft, the soft of the soft are very soft, right. And then the loud orchestral explosions will be huge. So there's no kind of compression going on here, and that'll be even magnified more because on SACD the volume level tends to be really low on these Beast ones.
Because they don't want to put any compression at all in that.
And I think the Sibelius is more of a indulgent piece, especially in the end, for the violin's technical things. And these are two composers that I really like a lot.
Yeah, me too.
As symphonic, but I was struck at how great the Nielsen orchestration is. And like I mentioned before, even in this violin concerto, he's got this beautiful palette of orchestral sounds that sounds more varied in comparison to the Sibelius. And so, I think coming after kind of Sibelius, we like Nielsen a lot and Van Humble, right?
Van Humble.
Yeah,
we'll have to. I really wish something by him would come out so we could just put it on the show and introduce listeners to him. He's fantastic.
To me, he's
an unknown composer.
That's kind of like after Beethoven, I like Sibelius, Nielsen, Van Humble is like where my mind goes to like satisfying orchestral kind of things. And I was happy to hear
Big
that.
Bones, yeah.
I have a recording of this Nielsen concerto, but I haven't really listened to it much, maybe just once. And so it was kind of nice to have it with the Sibelius here. And I wouldn't be too hard on a young performer like this. He does have
I don't either.
Impressive technique and a sweet sound. I think they could have made him sound larger on the recording. The engineers should have worked a little bit better on that. But still, satisfying performance. And I hope that since he seems to be getting some attention, and I like that he's choosing these Scandinavian, sort of centered recordings. So I hope that maybe some first-time listeners will get to hear Nielsen and say, "Oh, why haven't I heard this before?" And that could be a good thing that comes out of it. But
let me give a recommendation. If you want to hear any Nielsen at all, listen to recordings by the San Francisco Symphony. Conducted by Herbert Blomstedt. This concerto, I forget who the soloist was on that, but they recorded this as well. And they recorded his 6 symphonies, and they're just fantastic. Listen to the ones on the Decca label.
Yep. That sets the standard there. There's been a few new ones and a couple other ones around that time, but that's the gold standard for Nielsen.
Performances, I want to say something, by the way. We have a lot of American listeners, and I'm sure they know something about baseball. So if you're, like, say, a solo violinist, like with this beautiful sound, he's just showing off this beautiful sound. It's sort of like being a pitcher who has a great fastball, but that's the only pitch you can throw. And it's just so fast that you can get a lot of batters out, but they know what's coming. So they're eventually going to figure it out, and I feel like that's what happens if you're constantly playing with this sweet tone and you're going to play for, like, you're going to hear two pieces for an hour. Pretty soon you're just going to know what to expect, and the music isn't exciting anymore, So that's kind of how I felt about it, But I don't want to put Dalene down. I do like his playing, and I really want to hear him as he goes on. He's very young, but that's the way I felt about the record. So there you go. Okay, here we go. The big highlight.
Go with the flow, baby. Go with the flow.
This album is called Flow, F-L-O-W.
Yeah, not the woman's name. Like,
oh, yeah.
Hello,
that's the
Flo.
Woman's name.
Yeah,
Flo, get me a coffee. No, not that one.
Not the girl from Queens, but
yeah. This is there's so much to say about this. The soloist name is Annelien van Wauwe.
Wow.
Wow, yeah. I kind of wish I could just say Annelien van Wow, because that would be the coolest name ever. She's the does kind of come out a little bit at the end. And she's playing not the clarinet, but the basset clarinet. Now, that's a clarinet. It's a little bulkier than a clarinet, and it can play, I think, 3, maybe 5, I don't know, lower notes than the clarinet can. So it has the whole range of the clarinet, but it can get down a little lower. And any reed instrument that can go lower is fine with me, and works very well on this particular recording. She's accompanied by the NDR Radiophilharmonie, conducted by Andrew Manze, the British violinist and now conductor. This is on the Pentatone label. The title of the album, Flow, F-L-O-W, is due to Van Wauwe's feeling that both the practice of music and yoga you heard that right, can lead into a flow state. Okay, so that's what she means by flow. Thankfully, she's not talking about what women usually mean when they talk about flow. So it means a mental... that took a while to land, huh?
Oh.
Okay. What it means is the mental state in which a person performing some activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, leading to full involvement and total enjoyment in the activity. Actually, rappers talk about flow too, like when it's really happening for them.
Well, now this is something interesting about music, and as a musician, I think lots of musicians probably have experienced this. When you learn music, there's sort of different stages. There's reading off from the page,
right,
where you're just kind of doing a mechanical kind of action. And then there's when you have music internalized, and then it doesn't happen all the time, but when you're really sort of engaged fully in a performance, it's almost as if you become beside yourself and you're watching yourself perform the music. It's almost as if, the music plays you, as it were.
Right.
And I think that's the flow state.
That happens to athletes as well. Like when they're really on, their basketball players just keep hitting baskets from everywhere, and pitchers just find their, in baseball, find their,
and I think, and I've heard like, composers and jazz musicians talk of this too, that as they feel like they become just a conduit for, these ideas that are coming from somewhere else, and they're writing them down, but they don't actually maybe feel that they're being generated within themselves, but they're more of a receiver for these kind of things. But I have to say, I can really appreciate that music one, but the yoga thing, for me, a person who has no lateral flexibility, I actually have pretty good, vertical flexibility. I can, lock my knees and put my palms on the floor, which isn't too bad. But if I had to go side to side or assume any of these poses, That's just wouldn't work. I think I did too many squats and deadlifts and bench presses back when I was young, and so
back in the day.
Yeah, I just can't get my chakras aligned.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that has to do with your chakras. I think you can.
Oh, really?
I think you can be a big fat guy and have your
Wasn't
chakras
that a pop
aligned.
singer?
It's possible. What?
Chakra Khan, wasn't she a pop singer?
Chaka.
Oh, not Chakra. Okay.
That's not Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan could be a cool new comic book hero, though. I think if anybody wants to create that.
I was mixing my metaphors there.
Yeah, that's what happens when you get older, I guess. I don't know.
I guess so, yeah.
I do that a lot too.
Anyway, this recording is kind of got a odd combination. We've got Mozart and yoga, which don't usually go together. But
well, the yoga is a composition by Wim Hendricks, who's a Flemish composer from Belgium.
Oh, right.
Okay, we'll get to that when we get to it, though. I do want to talk about the cover photo before we get to the music. It shows Van Wauwe standing in profile with her left hand forming a mudra. She's got her thumb touching her middle finger. I think, because I can't see her pointer finger. It's so I don't know if both the fingers are touching or if only one is. So I don't know what mudra that is. I can't really tell.
Oh.
Anyway.
Yeah, I see that.
Because you can't see where her pointing finger is.
I think
it could be touching the thumb, or it could just be bent behind it and you just don't see it.
Yeah, or
but
maybe she only
those are
has
two
4
different
fingers.
mudras, though. So I don't want to say what it means.
It actually looks like she only has 4 fingers.
In the photo, it looks like she has 4 fingers.
Which would make it really hard to play clarinet.
I know. I'm sure the other fingers that she might be like, it's the angle just might be obscuring it. She might be touching her thumb with that too. Anyway, Van Wauwe says she's hoping that through this recording to induce a state of flow in us. I'm hoping she succeeds. Let's see. All right. First, we get the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. Oh, one of my favorite works ever, as are many of Mozart's pieces. I really love him. This in A major, K622. This was written in 1791, the last year of his life. A lot of people like to call it a late Mozart work, but we got to remember Mozart died at 35. Mozart didn't think of it as a late work when he was writing it. So that's really inappropriate. He probably figured he had another 35 years to live, at least. All right. But alas, we lost all that music. Anyway, boy, music history would have been really different if Mozart had lived another 35 years, because Beethoven and him probably would have been duking it out. I don't know. Anyway, this amazing concerto, which was originally written for the basset clarinet, and it's wonderful to hear it here. A lot of Mozart's melodies go into the deep, low end of the instrument, and when it's performed by a regular clarinet, those are transposed upwards, and they're less satisfying. I really like it more when it's played by the basset clarinet, as it is here. All right, so in the Allegro, Manze's orchestra, Andrew Manze's orchestra, sounds pretty small. The opening orchestral introduction has an intimate feel, and it's beautifully paced. Detail is easily audible. A lot of the material in the bass that echoes from the high strings is highlighted, and these are details I hadn't noticed before in other recordings. Van Wauwe plays with a gorgeous, smooth tone. I liked this right away. She takes the opening notes of the orchestra as the orchestra did, with a slight staccato on the first phrase, which is not the way I'm used to hearing it. Usually it's all legato. At 2 minutes and 70 seconds, we hear the first basset clarinet notes. Well, the low notes, the ones that only the basset clarinet can play. The instrument goes lower than the clarinet. You hear it again at the 3-minute mark, and on runs going up from the low end of the instrument at 3 minutes and 8 seconds, if you want to check that out. Van Wauwe's phrasing is light and attractive. There's a nice pregnant pause at 4 minutes and 28 seconds in the exposition. Subtleties of phrasing, such as the detachment of notes in the upward rising figure after 5 minutes, are particularly pleasing. The development starts at 5 minutes and 54 seconds. Remember, this is a sonata form movement. 5 minutes and 54 seconds is pretty late in the movement. Another 6 around 6 minutes 30 seconds, the clarinet hangs out at its bottom end, and I love the resonant sound it makes here. There are also some lovely low-end frequencies at 7 minutes and 30 seconds. The recapitulation of the opening material that we heard at the beginning starts at 8 minutes and 31 seconds. We hear the low end of the instrument at 10 minutes and 30 seconds again. I was mesmerized by the performance in this movement, despite one or two odd things. I took them on. I liked them. Balance is fairly even between the clarinet and orchestra, with the clarinet forward enough that you can hear it when the orchestra has the theme and it's playing mid-range figuration. Second movement is very famous, Adagio. It's just this wonderful melting movement. Probably what who wrote MacArthur Park? Who is that guy? Wichita Lineman. Oh man, I can't. Who's the writer?
Jimmy Webb.
Jimmy Webb, right?
Yeah.
Probably. I imagine Jimmy Webb had this movement in mind when he was thinking of MacArthur Park melting in the dark. Just my idea.
Never have that recipe again.
The thing about that song is recipe has to be the most unmusical word there is. It's 3 syllables. It just doesn't fit in. Ugh. Oh. Now you got to get me started.
Yeah, I got that stuck in my head now. Oh my!
I love the way it goes. I'll never have that recipe again like it. And then he goes,
"Oh
no!" Like it's like this huge tragedy.
I heard Richard Harris saying that, didn't he? Wow! What a weird musical thing.
All right. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of Jimmy Webb, but not of MacArthur Park. Okay. Park, I really do think Wichita Lineman is one of the best
great
songs ever. You know, and Jimmy Webb is one of the great songwriters ever. But you know, we all have our
everybody
low points.
Everybody has a bad one once in a while.
Okay, a bad hit song. Oh man, yes, it was still a big hit. I still had to hear it a lot when I was a kid. All right, so anyway, this Adagio is just melts, and it starts out exceptionally well. It's a bit slower than usual, with the orchestra gently undulating as the basset clarinet's liquid tone outlines the theme. I enjoyed the gentle, barely audible but present back and forth ticking of the orchestra strings at 2 minutes and 30 seconds as the violin plays its theme. Notice after 3 minutes and 30 seconds how the basset clarinet takes an upward run from its low range, and the Andromans draws out an imitation of that low note in the basses. I really loved that detail. This movement is full of lovely details, in fact, in this performance especially. The gorgeous false cadence, and I'm a big fan of false cadences, as I've mentioned earlier, at 6 minutes and 23 seconds is beautifully taken and registers completely at this slow tempo. You just feel like something that somebody was going to give you is just taken away. Oh. I like that. I don't like it when it happens in real life, but I like it when it happens in music. All right. I love the pacing from that moment onto the final cadence, all slow and soothing. This is just a fantastic performance of this movement. Third movement, Rondo. Allegro. This, in contrast to the Adagio, is at a regular speed or slightly faster. It's got an upbeat, pastoral, dance-like quality here. It's in 6/8 time. Again, I love the tone at the lower end when the first episode's theme is repeated by the clarinet after 1 minute and 30 seconds. Also, Van Wauwe's ability to quieten without losing her tone after 2 minutes and 30 seconds when she repeats another theme. I like the honks Van Wauwe gets after 4 minutes in the low notes on the octaves before she starts on a melodic theme. After 4 minutes and 45 seconds, we hear the rondo theme again, and then it quickly darkens to minor in a surprising, dramatic episode, well put across here. We're back in high spirits at the end as the piece ends on a strong tonic. This is one of my favorite works by one of my favorite composers, and this performance was fantastic, one I will definitely return to. Okay. Hard act to follow, and Wim Hendricks, well... What are you going to do? You can't, this is just, you can't really follow this. So you have to do something totally different. So Flemish composer Wim Hendricks, he's from Belgium, based in Antwerp, and he was born in 1962. So he's around our age. He's older than both of us, really, but he's around. He's close. This piece is called Sutra, which is really, it's taken from Hinduism and Buddhism, this word is used. Concerto for bassett, clarinet, orchestra, and electronics. And there's no year of composition for this piece. Apparently, it was finished in 2022 for this recording, or 2021, which is, I don't remember when the recording was made. I can look it up. Anyway, this piece is based on breath, which is appropriate for the clarinet, yogic philosophy, and meditation. And I say, why not? I said this before I heard the piece. Not enough music has been dedicated to this pursuit in the West. We need more themes, and I think yoga is as good a theme as any to write about. I'm sure. Oh, it was. This was recorded in November 2021, so I'm guessing that this piece was composed or finished in 2021. Okay. The piece was commissioned by BBC Radio 3 in England and in Britain with the Borletti Buitoni Trust, and the premiere took place. It was supposed to take place on March 31st, 2022. I assume it did. Just a month ago. So it's new to the world, this piece, really. Throughout the work, the electronics, which were developed by Jarrett Taminga, create a spatial atmosphere and unify the separate parts of the concerto as a whole. This is the booklet notes talking now, not me. The work is said to create a profound connection between the performers and the audience through sound vibration. Sounds new agey. I hate it when people talk like this.
Where's my mood
anyway,
ring?
Yeah, I'll be the judge of that, okay? Anyway, let's see. The first movement is called Pranayama, Breath of Life. Okay, these are all yoga breathing terms here. Pranayama is the practice of controlling the movement of the prana, or vital force, usually through the control of the breath. Okay, so the music here centers around one note, E, and there are a lot of noise sounds in the orchestra, like sighing woodwinds, brass players blowing air in their instruments, strings bowing on the bridges, and others. And you need a quiet room to pick up the beginning of the work because of the earthy, breathy sounds. It's very quiet. There are distant chimes as well. It sets a nice, mysterious atmosphere. It's a really appealing sound overall. I thought it was really cool, kind of soothing in a way, and also mysterious. We finally hear a string instrument, probably a cello, at 1 minute and 35 seconds, playing melodic figures that more or less repeat. Now, the whole idea of this is that noise becomes pitch, so it's sort of like the world, or the form coming into being around you, I guess. There are drooping figures from the winds that are kind of disturbing. Okay. That sound always kind of disturbs me. Then there's this really cool harmony at around 2 minutes and 45 seconds that bends in and out of tune, kind of like wavering. I like it. It kind of reminds me of like an experience I had in a meditation. Here I go, getting all new agey on you now. Or I had this kind of like image of like just everything around me, just kind of, how like when you look on a really hot day, everything looks like it's kind of like.
Are you sure that wasn't an acid trip or something?
It could have been, but these things happen in meditation too. So it kind of reminded me of that, and I was kind of like digging that somebody had put this into the score. The waveringness of material reality. The clarinet finally, like it's not stable somehow. The clarinet finally comes in near its low register at 3 minutes into this 7 minute and 40-second movement. It hovers there and doesn't really stand out until about 3 minutes and 30 seconds when the orchestra momentarily drops out and gives it the spotlight. Its repeating low register figures are reminiscent of the clarinet's figures in The Rite of Spring. This reminded me of Stravinsky a bit here. It settles on a more extended melodic figure, and the movement never gets harsher than Stravinsky's ballet. So if you're wondering how much of a challenge this is going to be, if you like The Rite of Spring, which is a pretty harsh sounding work but familiar to us all now, it never goes beyond that as far as like ear-splitting sounds. The soloist and orchestra start chanting the word pranayama at about 4 minutes and 50 seconds. I'm not a big fan of this chanting in a musical work. I kind of want the composer to put the idea across musically with tones, okay? And I feel like, I don't know, it just becomes practice here, the practice of meditation. Then the clarinet plays its highest register for the first extended period of time. I mean, I don't want to complain about that. It's what the composer wanted, but it's just my feeling about it. The atmospheric haze returns suddenly at 5 minutes and 52 seconds. The clarinet and some other wind instruments flutter over it. By the end, the clarinet's material has a sense of urgency. There are some pretty cool, unsteady sounds from the orchestra in interesting timbres. The movement suddenly ends as the clarinet cuts off its line. So pretty intriguing so far. I rather liked this movement. Second movement, dhyana, meditation. Dhyana is the continuous flow of attention towards an object. So concentration, really, I guess. Although the next movement is concentration. Yeah, okay. I think that's more focused concentration, though. Okay, so you're aware of something, really. I guess that's what dhyana is here. The movement introduces a meditative atmosphere using various types of bell sounds, and the bassy clarinet expresses this meditative state through free, arabesque-like phrases that lead into a section during which a large sustained chord is gradually built up by the orchestra. Okay, we hear bells over an unfocused haze, then droning sounds from the orchestra. The clarinet comes in and plays a line with either chromatic notes thrown in or microtones. I couldn't tell given the context, but it sounds a little off, and it's in a good way. I rather liked the sound. It was kind of exciting. It sounds out of the ordinary and is compelling. Meanwhile, bells are chiming in the background as the orchestra provides a light droning effect in an odd harmony. There's more chanting by the soloist after 2 minutes, this time of the word dhyana and other words. And then there's a multiphonic sound from the clarinet, and it's pretty cool. You can hear it at just after the 2 minute and 30-second mark. That's one clarinet playing that. It's just a split sort of sounding like multiple notes, but they're kind of really... It's almost like someone just shoved a fork into the clarinet sound and split it up into a lot of different shards of sound. Let's see. The clarinet follows up the multiphonic sound with brief figurative fragments. The chanting resumes. It strikes me that the soloist is pretty busy in this meditative movement because she has to chant and play the clarinet. Not at the same time, but alternating. At 3 minutes 30 seconds, the clarinet is back to fluttering figuration. We hear more multiphonics from the clarinet just before the 4 minute mark. To me, this whole section with the droning background makes it feel like we're in the mysterious world of the observing mind. All unstable and mysterious. At 5 minutes and 45 seconds, an ostinato bell-like pattern is heard in the orchestra, and the clarinet gently plays circling figures over it. The texture changes again at 7 minutes, where we get a lower chime and some distantly wind-like howling in the low winds and strings, I think. The clarinet comments in its low register, circling around a particular note, and the piece suddenly fades. It's a natural fade from the players. I do want to say, though, the chiming effects are really welcome in a piece like this. They're really pretty, and I think add a lot of appeal to the piece, which otherwise might seem kind of weird. Third movement, dharana, mind concentration. Dharana is the binding of the mind to one place, so you're really focused on something. This is an explosive, energetic movement with measure changes and rhythmical gestures. The clarinet virtuosically dialogues with the entire orchestra. So this starts aggressively with a loudish wind figure, a loud-ish wind figure in the orchestra. It circles a lot, and the clarinet plays different but similarly shaped material, so the winds and the clarinet are all sort of circling around each other. The timpani outline a syncopated beat. This is a high-speed movement, and I like the sound of the woody percussion played at this tempo. It kind of sounds like, rain falling in a forest with a lot of, hollow trees in it or something. You can hear them a lot after 1 minute and 30 seconds, so go to that point. The rhythm suddenly stops at around 4 minutes, and we hear a brass figure ring out like an obnoxious fanfare. The clarinet honks out a similar melody at around 4 minutes and 40 seconds. It's now isolated, and this is the cadenza. The percussion starts up again after 5 minutes and 10 seconds, and the movement picks up energy as the clarinet plays a circular pattern. It says there are tablas in this movement, but I couldn't hear them. They seem to be far in the back, and I didn't pick them up on I didn't listen in headphones, and I couldn't pick them up at the volume I was listening to on my speakers. But I did like the solar plexus hitting bass on the very last note. Turn up your volume for that. You get a nice clearing of the heart chakra with that bass hit there, especially if you have a subwoofer.
Is there a heart chakra?
There is.
Oh.
Yeah. There are 7 chakras. One of them is like over your head. It's not even in your body.
Huh. Wow.
Samadhi, the 4th movement, and this is a pretty famous word, intense spiritual union. This is where you become one with the universe. Okay. This is the movement where the Buddhist monk goes up to the hamburger stand and tells the clerk, "Make me one with everything." Okay, we'll let that one go. Anyway, samadhi is where unity, union with God, with the entire world, with everything there is, where the concentrator and the object become one. Okay, the highest state of mental concentration that people can achieve while still bound to the body. So apparently after we're dead, it even gets better. That's reassuring.
Something to look forward to.
I know, right? All right. There's a heavenly beginning with brief harp glissandos and gentle strings like we're in a sacred garden. This is really pretty. I felt good listening to this. The cello plays a figure, and we hear the clarinet circling in its high end. This sounds prayer-like to me in a really appealing way. Lots of bent pitches from the clarinet from 1 minute and 45 seconds on. Also from perhaps the bassoon. A rhythm starts up around 3 minutes and 45 seconds with the clarinet circling around in its lower register as the orchestra provides atmosphere. The soloist starts chanting the word samadhi, which kind of... I mean, if I started chanting the word samadhi, it would be okay, but I feel I don't want that happening on the recording. I don't know. She starts chanting the word samadhi just before the 5-minute mark. It's part of the composition. Then starts playing a fluttering melody again with other wind instruments fluttering around her. That drooping figure comes back again in the clarinet and woodwinds. We get a lot of circling from the clarinet and strings afterwards, as if seeking a home tone to perch on, or perhaps observing all before it. There's a shimmering backdrop of quiet bell tones blanketing the back wall of the piece as the soloist and orchestra play. At the 8 minute and 45 seconds mark, the clarinet settles on a single note that's repeated, then circled around. The samadhi chant returns, chanted only by the soloist at 9 minutes and 25 seconds or so, and the piece ends with these words. All in all, I enjoyed this piece. It's very different from the Mozart, but they oddly fit well on the same recording. I don't know. Yeah, I thought so. I didn't feel like jolted out of my seat by this. I saw the video promoting the release of this album, and Van Wauwe seems an enthusiastic soloist. I'm rather delightfully surprised that Manze's handling of the orchestra, especially in Sutra, a new work, he conducts like he's made for this type of music, as well as the earlier Baroque and classical periods that he started his career in. It's a bit of an adventurous listen, but one worth hearing. I liked it. I'll revisit it. I do want to say I'm not a big fan of the chanting in this work. I think it would have worked well without that. But that's me. I'm more of a musical purist, and when I hear an instrumental work, I really want it to be instrumental, unless there's going to be singing in it, like in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. But there you have it. That's what the composer did, and it's a work worth hearing. I think it'll appeal to quite a few people with slightly adventurous ears.
Yeah, I'm less enthusiastic. It's okay. It was
so you
something
haven't spent
different.
time in the yoga studio. That's why.
No, I have spent time in India.
But
But not being a yoga kind of person, I don't know. All this
I'm not a yoga. I have issues with yoga people. That's the thing.
Yeah, me too.
Yoga itself, I like though. It's okay.
I don't know. It's all right. It's definitely something different. Some interesting stuff. I'm not a big fan of chanting or recitations so much in any style of music. But some interesting orchestral textures, pitch play, sometimes disconcerting, but sometimes creating a new atmosphere.
Yeah. It intrigued my ear, I have to say, a lot of this.
I was up for hearing something in contrast to the Mozart, and I got it. So
you certainly did.
Yeah. Hey, check it out. I made it to the end. It's not that. I mean, compared to a lot of late 20th and 21st century music, it's actually a pretty easy listen. You can follow along what is being aimed at, and the recording notes are actually kind of helpful to understand the concept. But compositionally, there's enough structure there, and it's easy to see what they're aiming at, and gets the clarinet doing some kind of interesting things. Clarinet is, I'll talk more about this in a moment, but it's kind of a boxed-in instrument in a way that most people have only heard it in, certain contexts. So I think it's good to have that instrument heard doing some different things, different techniques, and in a different setting, and it sort of liberates it from its sort of traditional kind of concept that it can get sort of pigeonholed into. So in that sense, why not? Align your chakras with some clarinet.
Yeah. I wasn't in a state of samadhi once the piece ended, but maybe it'll happen one day. We'll see.
You didn't get a Joe Rogan third eye on your forehead? Or?
Yeah, the third eye didn't appear.
Didn't appear yet.
It's still asleep.
Yeah, it's only the first listen. I listened to a few more times.
Okay, it'll happen soon. Yeah. I'm still waiting.
All right. Well,
it's all clarinet from here on in.
Continuing on that, it was just one idea. I've got such a huge list of things to listen to in jazz, and I said, well, wow, I've got all these clarinet recordings. And why that's interesting is, the history of clarinet in jazz is kind of an interesting one. Clarinet was one of the main instruments, in early jazz in New Orleans because, the New Orleans music culture had brass band and marching kind of tradition. So you started out with, trumpet, trombone, clarinet, saxophones. But clarinet played a big role in New Orleans, or so-called Dixieland jazz, right? And that carried on over into the swing period, the king of swing, right? Benny Goodman. And so you had a, clarinet, having a big main role in the big band era too, with a lot of band leaders and soloists playing clarinet. But something happened in modern jazz. Once bebop came around, the clarinet was largely abandoned in favor of the saxophone, with notable exceptions. You've got like Buddy DeFranco, and, later on, someone we're a big fan of, Eddie Daniels. But largely, when we hear clarinet these days, it's sort of like an additional sort of part of the arsenal of woodwind players who are mainly sax players. And, so we don't hear it as the main instrument on recordings often enough, which is a shame, because it certainly has all the capabilities of saxophone as a main voice, although, it doesn't have quite the breadth of presence and fullness of tone, but it is a lovely instrument. And so I just happened to be getting a bunch of recordings on my list with clarinet, and I said, clarinet's something we should hear more of in jazz, and so let's take a listen to a few of these. And so that's the plan. We're going to start out with one that'll probably slip under the radar of most jazz listeners.
I think all three of these would probably still slip onto the radar.
It could be. But, that's my purpose here.
But they shouldn't.
I'm digging deep in the new releases. I'm spending almost an hour every day searching through things that come out to find interesting things because, the level of musicianship is very high around the world, and there's lots of things going on internationally that it's impossible to keep up on everything, but I'm doing my best here. And so for our first clarinet trip, we're going to go to Spain, and we're going to look at a clarinetist here, Arturo Pueyo. And this is a self-release. It's his own release, so that's another reason why it probably won't show up on the radar of a lot of jazz press. But this is Derroteros, which I guess means something like roots or like, paths of travel or something like that. And so we've got his release here. Also with him on this recording, Rodrigo Ballesteros on drums, Tomas Merlo, bass, Seir Caneda on piano, and Pueyo on clarinet, and also the compositions and direction of the musical material here. And he's a Spanish clarinetist from Ibiza. And he's got an interesting collection of songs here. I also got some guest players here. We've got some sax and trumpet and a little bit of vocal on here too. I thought this was an intriguing recording. We start out with a tune called Ala Ido. This features Daniel Juarez on tenor sax, Miron Rafajlovic on trumpet. This one starts out with a nice little ostinato bass groove. Throw in some clicky drums to form kind of a Latin beat. A lot of the beats on here are sort of more what I would think of as, Central South American kind of rhythmic.
They kind of suggest a Latin beat. You know what I mean? It's
not full on, but
you're not getting all those percussion instruments.
But they're more even beat, although there is some swing in here too. Anyway,
this one has a cowbell too.
Yeah, cowbell, more cowbell. The beat gets started on this one, and then sax and trumpet come in on a rather kind of muscular minor theme. There's some cool ornaments, little kind of turny things on it that are cool. And then what's nice here is that Pueyo has also got the bass clarinet in his arsenal. And
that's
so
always awesome.
Yeah, on this tune, he comes in on bass clarinet that has an answering line to the trumpet and sax. So it's a kind of nice three-horn combo. They go around the melody twice, and you want to hear it again because it's a cool little melodic exposition there. The horns then trade solo phrases from bass clarinet to tenor to trumpet. There's a lot of space here. Because there's no chordal instrument on this track, which I thought was nice. Actually, the whole album is sandwiched that way. We don't have any chordal instrument, so the horns have to, fill in a lot of the harmonic cues other than what the bass gives them. The solos are spirited. They gain intensity until they tie back into another round of the melody with a nice little outro to finish it up. So a cool start to this recording.
Yeah, the bass clarinet, by the way, you remember the movie Godzilla, the first Godzilla movie?
Oh, yeah.
The bass clarinet features prominently when Godzilla appears.
Yeah.
You remember that? It's always in its low end, sounding really forlorn.
Unfortunately, it gets
heavy.
Pigeonholed like the bassoon for sort of, conjuring up these kind of ominous or scary kind of things.
Yeah, I'm talking about the 1954 Godzilla movie, the first time Godzilla ever appeared, not the new American ones. Okay.
And track 2, ... y sin poderlo remediar. I guess it's something like it's unable to fix or can't be repaired or something like that. Without
being able to remedy it.
I guess there's nothing you can do. Forget about it. Anyway, so it starts with a light drum intro. Very relaxed Latin beat. Pretty melody. Comes in, and he's back to regular standard clarinet. Pueyo is here. Now we get piano on this piece, so Kaneda is in, and we get some chord action happening. Pueyo has a kind of fast, quivering vibrato sometimes. It gives the piece kind of a nostalgic feel with that kind of shimmering sound. His approach is relaxed and lyrical, but it's energetic in feeling. He builds a chain of rising notes into the upper register in this solo here. Kaneda has a nice relaxed piano solo here with trickles of notes. And there's also a melodic bass solo by Merlo. He has a very pleasing, rounded kind of bass tone. When they go through all the solos, then Pueyo goes once more through the melody for another pretty play through. So I wonder what they needed to remedy or fix, because it sounded pretty good here. But that's just the title. And we've got tracks 3 and 4 sort of go together. 3 is Intro a Anansi, and 4 is Anansi. So introduction to Anansi, and then itself.
I guess the Anansi is someone's name, right?
Yeah, sounds like a name. The intro has some intense clarinet soloing over a long held rubato chords. That gives way to some drum soloing. That's an intro to the next track. And then the drum continues, forms a fast beat for Pueyo to introduce this melody over some dense accented piano chords from Kaneda, who is also up for the first solo. Ballesteros shifts the free drumming to a fast swing. Changes up, and Kaneda is there in the groove with his piano solo lines over Merlo's walking bass, ending up with some bluesy kind of descending figures, and then it's off for Pueyo to take over. He's more aggressive here. He's got some kind of post-boppy solo phrases on the clarinet, gets up in the higher register. They hit a kind of vamp thing that gets going for Ballesteros to get started with some drum soloing. Then he simmers it down, and the piano comes in with some chords to make an ending for the piece. Next, we've got, let's see, this is the piece with the vocalist, Roqueta Sam Meora Roca, and featuring Angela Cervantes on vocals. This is a big rubato intro on bass clarinet, so yeah, enjoyable here. A lazy waltz develops out of this with Pueyo playing the melody until Cervantes starts the vocals. She's got a kind of a breathy alto voice. She pushes the vibrato on some more intense phrases. There's a lot of contrast in this piece in the feeling of the vocals. Pueyo adds lines in the vocal gaps and in an interlude between verses. Cervantes continues with a big climax push, and there's a big pause before the final ending. So nice little vocal piece in there. I wish my Spanish were better so I could understand what it's about, but
it's really pretty. Yeah,
it's nice.
I don't know that this is this looks like it's, the title looks Portuguese to me, but I can't really tell. I tried to put it in, but it didn't come out as in translation from Portuguese. I don't know.
Not sure.
I don't know what it is. It's it's definitely not straight Spanish. It might be Catalan too.
Could be.
I'm not sure.
6, Moral. This is a hard driving swing one here. Pueyo plays the melody on clarinet. The beat changes up to a Latin beat over kind of a modal chord section. It's that swing, Latin, and then traditional harmony to more modal contrast. It always sounds great in jazz, and it just drives the soloists to change up between the two. Kind of goes back to the hard bop period when that was used all the time. Pueyo handles the contrast nicely in his solo. He drives hard on the swing sections, and then he gets some cool harmonic tensions on the Latin, more modally things. Cervantes is up for some hard swinging on his solo here too, which is intense. He really hammers out the chords underneath. And Pueyo comes back for another round to close it out. Track 7, we've got another guest on this one, which is called Encandilao. Ariel Bringuez on tenor sax here. Starts with a rubato clarinet and sax over piano kind of cascading together. Chords that start out on the piano there too, until Ballesteros gets a Latin feeling beat rolling along. The sax plays the melody with Pueyo adding answering phrases. Pueyo has a very shimmering solo here with tight, tumbling rhythmic figures in his lines. Mingus is more breathy and breezy in his solo, still matching the mood of the piece, though. They get rubato for a while weaving the sax and clarinet lines over a bowed bass and piano, and Mingus finishes it out with his kind of breathy, relaxing style. So another player joining in the mix here on this tune. Track 8, No aparques en doble filava. I didn't translate it. I don't know what it means.
I did. I said, don't park in a double line.
Oh, nice title.
I put this into Google Translate.
Okay. This is a happy little melody line that has kind of questions and answers for itself, which is cool. It goes back and forth. It's clarinet over a bouncing beat. It's got a nice little bridge section in the tune, too. Pueyo works a lot in the lower register here before he takes it up higher in his solo. Lots of good swinging energy. Also, Cervantes has a solo, clearly articulated notes in fast lines and some nice rolling chords. And Pueyo runs through the bouncy theme once more to close it out. It's a fun, energetic piece.
Yeah, it was fun.
Track
Speaking
9.
of fun, energetic pieces, yeah.
Yeah, Pedala Sol. This is a cool one. Some solo clarinet intervals and phrases make an intro to this very pretty tune. A delicate Latin beat forms on drums with nice bass pulses added to it. Pueyo carries this melody on clarinet with very nice articulation. Merlo gets around sounding but rhythmically tight bass solo added in there, and then over to Cervantes, who's got a lot of variety of rhythmic patterns in his piano solo. Then Pueyo, who gets flowing lines and also mixes up the rhythmic feels really well on this one, shows off his upper register tone and then brings it back down softly to tie into the melody once more. I think I put the video of this on the Facebook page. So if you come over, you can link to that little
nice
studio.
Piece.
Yeah, nice composition. And let's see, is this the last tune? Yeah, it is. 10, Un Año. And this is the bottom bread of the sandwich, like the first tune, a pianoless piece, bringing back Daniel Juarez and Miron Rafajlovic, tenor sax and trumpet. Fun and funky right from the intro here. And so we've got back to bass clarinet with the two other horns, and the bass clarinet and bass are in unison on an intro line, which is a cool combination. The bass continues on with an ostinato pattern as the tenor sax and trumpet get a slinky melody line. There's an interlude starting with the tenor, and then the clarinet and trumpet jump in. Trumpet and sax form another line, and bass clarinet and bass do an outro to that. Like the first tune, as I said, there's no piano, and the horns trade solo ideas over the perpetual bass and Ballesteros drumming. They work up to some intense interplay and fun harmonic ideas and return to the slinky melody line, work to the end with some variations of bass clarinet and bass on more choppy figures that are interspersed with trumpet and sax phrases, while Ballesteros plays it up on drums until a final phrase with the trumpet screaming it out up an octave for a nice hit of an ending. So it's a fun album of clarinet and bass clarinet. I like the programming, the sandwich of pianoless tunes of the other material. It's got mostly Latin-y feel, so these are Spanish musicians mainly here. But there's a good mix of swinging and hard bop kind of intensity to the tunes. We got one vocal tune too, and yeah, Pueyo sounds really nice. He's got a lot of enthusiasm. The arrangements are engaging, and this album, I hope more people get to hear it, and I want to hear more from his clarinet playing, especially with the bass clarinet mixed in too. Yeah, a fun listen.
Yeah, I was very happy to have heard this album myself. It's a very appealing album. Another one of these albums I never would have heard.
Yeah.
Were we not doing this podcast? It's nice little surprise. The clarinet has a good sound, shapes his phrases beautifully, and he gets like this autumnal French feeling when he plays ballads. Now, when I say French, what I mean, they pay attention to timbre. in French. So you get this real sense of the melody fitting the clarinet and, making the timbre carry the piece.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I really enjoyed that about his playing. I especially like the bass playing on this record. He's got a thick, present, upfront sound that I found very appealing, and his solos were well formed and had good content. So between the clarinet and the band, of course, the bass clarinet, always, bass clarinets are always welcome in my place. So that was great too. It's nice. So I listened to the bass player too. I really enjoyed his playing.
Yeah, it's good. He's got that shimmering sound on clarinet sometimes. It's like very fast, almost tremolo kind of thing. Yeah, it's nice. I was happy to find that. All right, now we're going to have the oddball recording to go a little bit out there. It's very weird, but I was just drawn to the instrumentation. Knew nothing about this group. We're going to jump over to Germany. How do we pronounce this? We're going to butcher some names here. Jörg
Schippa, I guess. Yeah.
Unbedingt.
Yeah, Unbedingt. Jörg Schippa's Unbedingt.
That's the name of the group, yeah.
Unbedingt. It's got a T at the end. You got to say that consonant.
And there's new, that's the name of the group, their new recording, Tanzpalast. And this is on the record, another record label like the Beriondi. I'm sure you've all heard of it, Jazz House Music.
That's a great name. It's a great label name.
Yeah, just stuff all that together. Jazz house music.
Jazz house music.
Right. And so I was just intrigued with the instrumentation here. And so Jörg Schippa's the description of this album was interesting. So Schippa's musical horizon is enormously broad. His playing structures combine extensive influences and listening habits of improvising musicians such as Miles Davis, Jim Hall, Ry Cooder, Jimi Hendrix, or composers of Western classical music such as Bela Bartok, Igor Stravinsky, Olivier Messiaen, Jorge Ligeti, and Alfred Schnittke. So it's a big combination.
All adult music favorites, I might mention.
Yeah. So how do you get that all with bass clarinet? I don't know, but that's why I decided to take a listen to this one. And he describes his current work in contemporary jazz as avant-garde and serious music. Quote, perhaps the current state of my music could be described as that of enlightened contemporary music in which purely sound painting components can be found as well as odd meter grooves, unquote, for sure. Back to the quote, bizarre melodies and unusual harmonic structures.
Oh, wow.
And I would agree with all of those things about this recording. Very unusual. We've got
at least he didn't say that he was going to make a connection between the performance and audience through sound vibration.
No, but by odd meters, he may connect or disconnect you, however you feel. So we've got, let's see, Jürgen.
We will connect through sound vibration.
Jürgen Kupke on clarinet, Florian Bergman on bass clarinet, Jörg Schippa on guitar. I have to say,
a lot of Jörgs in this group, huh?
Yeah, I have to say he's a very un-guitar-like guitarist. He's rather he rather lays back and lets the clarinets play a lot. And Christian Marian on drums. Now, other than the unusual music on this recording, we've got some pretty weird titles too. So the first one, I believe, is pronounced Jungle, but that's capital D, capital J, Ungle. So like DJ Uncle. Yeah. Anyway,
in there too.
It appropriately starts with a kind of jungle type beat on the drums. Now I'm going to do my best to talk through these, but this is
my notes on this are really, really long, and it'd be like the Beethoven last week where I'll lose my way halfway through.
I started to give up, so I can just kind of give you a basic kind of thing. There's so many things changing in these tunes too. Anyway, after the jungle beat.
Remember the CPE Bach piano Fantasia we heard? This is kind of like that, except like the rooms are a lot smaller and there are a lot more of them.
yeah, exactly. So we get this jungle beat going. Clarinet and bass clarinet start the melody. Finally, Schippa adds some guitar's chords underneath. The bass clarinet switches to a bass figure, which is kind of cool on this album. It happens a lot. It just becomes the bass instrument. And the clarinet goes off on its own line. The guitar adding another line to the bass rhythm with the drums dropping out. They join in for another line with the drums then. Schippa takes over alone over the drums for some rhythmic, fast-picked guitar improvisation. The clarinets come in softly underneath for some backing lines, and the beat falls apart to some free clarinet exchanges. Bass clarinet gets a new rhythmic riff going here, and the clarinet joins in on that. So some fast unison clarinet lines lead back to the drums returning, and everyone going around new melody theme. So you get the idea of what you're in store for. A lot of changing pieces.
Yeah, it's a lot like this. Also, you said that the rhythm falls apart. That's something that happens often on this album. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. It just really sounds like it just collapses. It loses steam, or it's like somebody unplugged something, and it all just kind of
goes over the side of the curb, and that's it. Okay, let's see. What do we got here?
Next we have Stolperjungchen.
Stolperjungchen. Yeah. This one, another drum beat. This one changes up feel.
Which I just want to say, I plugged this into the translation, and it came out as Trippy Boy.
Oh, wow.
I really don't know if that's accurate. But
I don't know. It's an interesting translation, though,
Yeah.
Stolperjungchen. Anyway.
Trippy Boy. Yeah, Jung Chen would be. Chen is kind of something. It's a young person.
Yeah.
Mädchen would be like a young woman, like a.
It is trippy. The whole album is kind of trippy here. Get a drum beat. Changes up the feel and joined by the bass clarinet. Both clarinets and guitar then get together for kind of an angular melody, and the drum setting under that is very clicky kind of beat. Things get mysterious soon with longer clarinet lines and guitar chords. Eventually, a kind of new groove develops between Marianne's drum and Schippa's choppy guitar chords. The bass clarinet and guitar form syncopated hits for Kupke to solo on clarinet. He gets intense and honky until it all pauses and resets to the original melody and a final kind of spiraling ending to it. Then we're off to the title track, Tanzpalast. What does that mean? Any idea?
Dance Palace.
Oh, Dance Palace. Okay.
Dance Palace. That's not what it sounds like.
Denny Terrio. There you go. This one has got some interesting meter things going on. I gave up trying to figure out what's actually happening, but begins with guitar arpeggios and clarinet lines. The bass clarinet adds a lower legato line, and finally the drum beat gets added. It feels like it's in 5/8, and then it switches to 6/8. But then other things change up. I'd like to see what the chart looked like for this, but the drums get some work over.
One wonders if there even was a chart for some of these pieces.
I don't know how they can remember it. If not, the drums get some work. It might all
be improvised, but you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's structure to these things, but it's kind of hard to
interview him and find out.
A few listens, the drums get some work over repeated long bass clarinet and guitar notes. Clarinet comes in on top with a more rhythmic line. It comes to a stop on a long note, but then the clarinet sort of resets with rubato lines that are soon harmonized by the bass clarinet. Everyone gets back to the original idea with the theme, changing meters and drums, stopping phrases together with the others. Interesting, challenging listen there. Track 4, Na Nu Nu Na. That's capital letter, small letter, capital small. Na Nu Nu Na. Slow drum figures knock out a strange beat with clarinets interjecting lines. It's a strange and unpredictable pace of what's going on here. The intensity kicks up with guitar, adding lines sometimes. The rhythm dissipates and a mercurial soup of clarinet lines, short guitar figures, and drum textures pours around a large bowl of a piece. A rhythmic riff of intensity develops in the guitar and bass clarinet, getting the drums pumping again. Schippa goes electric then, with some heavy effect-laden but bluesy-tinged guitar lines. And finally, the clarinets take over for the final section to the end. Yeah, I wasn't expecting those electric guitar effects, but woke me out.
This kind of led me to the idea that one of the goals of this project was to, using the word explore, all of the sounds that the instrument, it's possible for the instrument to make, because they really do seem to be going for any kind of expression that they can get out of their individual instruments in some pieces, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of exploration here. Yeah. Track 5, Baby Bop. So, or BB, no, because, well, it's like bebop. It would have to be
Baby,
Capital B, E, capital B, I, capital B, O, P.
In the German, it's probably Baby.
Baby Pop, Baby Bop.
Baby Bop. Yeah.
This one, clarinet and guitar work together for the intro line, and then bass clarinet gets a bass line of syncopated ideas going, turns into a strangulation of the clarinet on a solo over drumming and strange guitar figures. The bass clarinet brings back the bass figures, and then the next section features some strange bass clarinet low tone and kind of overtone multiphonic plays here. That turns into sounds of tonguing and breath, aided by strange guitar string rubbing. And finally, they all join back in for a run through the theme, ending with some flutters. So
there you go. Timbre, techniques, whatever. Yeah. Exploring the instruments.
Track 6, Las Gehen.
Las Gehen. Let go.
Las Gehen. Let go.
Las Gehen. Let go. Let it go,
Let it go. A slow clarinet theme, working with the bass clarinet over rhythmic guitar figures on this one. It's almost pretty, actually, here. The closest this album gets to maybe pretty. That won't last for long, though, because a faster, more rhythmic theme develops and a new bass clarinet bass line and the guitar get a kind of modal progression going for the clarinet to solo over. Comes back to more unison rhythmic lines in the clarinets and a final dirge of slowing drive to the end with a surprising final chord. This one sticks out as a little bit different here.
Yeah, it kind of runs out of steam again. It falls.
It's just kind of dirge of lack of energy at the end, and not Rumpelstiltskin, but Rumpelstiltskin,
which very well might be the way it's written.
Rumpelstiltskin in German.
Yeah.
This one starts with closely harmonized clarinets. I think we got some seconds coming out here for a little dissonance. Run along over drum and guitar rhythms. The beat disappears for some free-form clarinet conversation that develops into a synchronized line. The return of guitar and drums comes soon. Schippa takes some strange guitar lines on his own before the clarinets drive on to anarchy and cat screams.
Next, I know that the opening melody has this kind of goofy hopping quality to it that really kind of bugged me too.
After that, the clarinets and guitar are back with a slow theme over some metallic scratching sounds, and it ends on a long held note. Strange. Track 8, Der Lurch.
Like
big drum beats
himself.
Yeah.
Der Lurch is I've got this translated as the amphibian. And,
the amphibian.
That's what it said. So
interesting.
There you go.
Big drum beats and bass clarinet start it. The clarinet and guitar joins in with counter ideas. The meter and rhythm constantly change up and stop. Bass clarinet gets a free exposition of low tones and chicken clucks. And clarinet and guitar add some answering ideas in snaking lines as the bass clarinet becomes more frenzied and finally returns back to the odd rhythmic thing from the beginning for a bit, ever unpredictable to the end.
Yeah.
And we'll end it all up with Am Grat.
On the Ridge.
On the Ridge. Guitar starts it out with a series of slow figures that are joined by bass clarinet. Clarinet adds another line to that as they move together lyrically. The drums interject and jolt with unpredictable rhythmic figures that synchronize the others. Schippa builds up tension with some guitar improvisational doodles and figures getting faster and more frantic, as do the clarinet lines laid on top. It slows to a stop, and the clarinet leads the way to a softer and slower final passage that goes to the end. Well, this one's guaranteed to get you out of your comfort zone in some way. Unpredictable changes, strange time signatures, nothing totally melodic. But if you like something experimental and unique instrumentation, 2 clarinets, bass and regular, playing around with kind of different elements of sound and time, could be up your alley. I was amused by it. I wasn't relaxed by it, but it was kind of interesting. Kind of cutting edge, with modern jazz experimentation, probably influenced a lot by modern classical things as well. So, a little bit out there, but
I kind of feel like that CPE Bach fantasy for solo piano that we heard earlier,
right.
It was written in the late 1700s or so, or the mid 1700s, and then 200 years later, this is the natural evolution of that. Basically. Unpredictable, going into different moods, lots of exploration. I found this album strangely compelling. I was locked in from the beginning and completely frustrated by my inability to get a handle on any of it. Yet I enjoyed the whole sound and the varying rhythms of this. Although I feel like it fell apart in the last 3 tracks. They kind of got into these kind of goofy, playful rhythms that kind of didn't appeal to me somehow. I love the combination of clarinet and bass clarinet, of course. The guitar sound was welcome. The whole approach was unique and complex. It's hard to know what to make of it, really. The compositions seem to be made up of various smaller compositions that are related sometimes and unrelated at others. A pleasant, enjoyable, never offensive challenge. It didn't stress me out. Let's just say that. Not one to listen to after you put your feet up after a hard day at work, but it's not terribly off-putting or anything like that.
No. Yeah, it's just unusual. And I'll go out on a limb for some bass clarinet. So
me too.
Overall enjoyable.
Yeah.
And now probably the most mainstream piece here. Although hardly a recognized enough player, but he's got some big name sidemen, and it's kind of a dedication album. We've got the clarinetist Harry Skoler on Sunnyside Records, Living in Sound, the Music of Charles Mingus. So it's a dedication to the great composer and bassist Charles Mingus.
Someone whose music I really can't get enough of either. So
always interesting. Still sounds fresh even when you listen to the old recordings today. So Skoler, he's a New Yorker. Well, Syracuse, New York, anyway. And so he's from upstate.
It really snows a lot there. So
like yours
he
truly.
Practiced a lot.
Yeah, yours truly. He's also a professor of woodwinds at Berklee College of Music.
In Boston.
Yeah, with his own music degree from there, and then a master's from New England Conservatory. So, all the big schools here. And I like this quote that he has here. This is from his own homepage, actually. Skoler understands the clarinet's endangered species status in jazz, and in his own expressive way is working to reverse it. The clarinet, this is quote, "The clarinet is a very difficult instrument to stick with in a group." He explains, "People can step all over it."
That's interesting.
It could be, it just doesn't have the full force of the saxophone, so it needs to have a little kind of protected environment for it, maybe. Anyway, he was impressed at a young age seeing Mingus live in person at Syracuse University, the university's Jabberwocky Student Club. And it was a very powerful experience for him musically. And so here, 40-some years later, he's got a collaborative effort here to dedicate something to Mingus with focus on arranging and including strings here too. So he's got let's see, who's the producer here? Walter Smith III, I guess, was the kind of catalyst for producing and getting this album together. And so we've got some interesting arrangements going on here by Darcy James Argue, Ambrose Akimusire, the trumpeter, and Fabian Almazan. They were kind of selected by the arrangers and Skoler and the producer Smith, and they sort of gave the arrangers free rein to be experimental and do what they wanted to do in the arrangements. And the musicians we've got involved in the recordings here are, of course, Skoler on clarinet, the great Kenny Barron on piano, always adds a nice touch. Probably in the most busy and amazing bassist around today, Christian McBride on acoustic bass. Jonathan Blake on drums, who we've heard on the podcast before. Jasmea Horn on vocals, up-and-coming new vocalist. Nicholas Payton on trumpet, another big name in the jazz world. And we've got a string section. Megan Gould on violin, Tomoto Omura on second violin, Karen Waltuch on viola, and Noah Hoffeld on cello. So a full jazz palette along with strings. So we'll go through here, starting out with a real famous, one of the most famous Mingus compositions, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. And the arrangement is by Fabian Almazan on this one. It begins with a somewhat mournful string intro over sparse piano, bass, and drums. Skoler comes in with the melody on clarinet with a very rich and warm tone, especially his lower register is very full. And it sounds like the cello doubles his melody line while the other strings are doing their own thing in the arrangement. So I thought that was a nice arranging touch. Usually I can do without strings in jazz, but they're kind of very well done here and in the album in general. So I don't find that they detract too much from the enjoyment of the regular jazz part. Skoler's solo on this tune explores a lot of different feelings, catches the sadness of the melody, but also sort of channels some angst, pushing into the upper register with some edgy tones and lines also. There's a string interlude and an understated piano solo by Barron that he takes enough time to develop when the strings drop out too. So I like that the strings sort of give some space away to the other instruments in the middle. Skoler comes back for another run through the melody, and the strings coming back partway through his solo to the end. I like the arrangement. There's enough space in it. It's not too thickly done. So nice opening track. Let's see. Track 2, Peggy's Blue Skylight. This arrangement is Darcy James Argue. Rhythmic figures of 3 beats and string bowing from riffs from Psycho form the intro for this one. If you remember the movie, those famous figures, they perform part
unforgettable.
They perform part of this intro here, but it's just getting things started with a little humor maybe. Skoler comes in with long noted phrases, and soon he's onto the melody over some stop time, and then things get swinging and the whole mood lightens up a lot. There's a lot of little rhythmic change-ups that keep things interesting. McBride has a nice bouncy bass solo. Skoler has some soloing interspersed with string interludes. He varies the register and tone a lot, beginning warm and low, then coming up higher. Barron's piano solo on this one is very rhythmic. Lots of pushing left-hand figures that drive what he's doing in the right-hand melodies along. He gets a long time to play, sometimes with the strings adding backing for his solo. Skoler comes back with the melody, winding it up with a surprising rising line before the intro figures, and the Psycho returns to stab you once more before the tune is over. So a little Psycho sandwich there. Then we've got
Psycho sandwich would be a great name for
a great name for
album of a band or something. I don't know.
I can think of a lot of good covers for the album too. Another Argue arrangement of 3. So this is kind of Mingus's dedication to Ellington, and now going back to him, Duke Ellington's Sound of Love. A pulsing string intro over tight bass, changes to more legato kind of things to make a lush sound bed for Skoler to blow the pretty melody in the lower register. There's some interesting contrasting pizzicato and legato backing string parts here. Some itchy, scratchy string figures too. May have you scratching at your neck collar. But then Skoler gets space to play only over McBride's bass. And the strings fade out before they come back in again. Continues on to the end with a few nicely placed pauses for a nice pretty ending. Then we've got track 4, another Almazan arrangement, Remember Rockefeller at Attica. So this one starts swinging along from the start with Skoler and Peyton working on the melody in unison. They split off into different lines. Things break down into repeated rhythmic figures between piano and clarinet. Then there's some free-form clarinet with added voice multiphonics to that. Was kind of cool effect. Peyton and the strings join in with kind of creepy descending lines. It comes to a stop and resets to the beginning theme after the drums get it going once more. Peyton gets a trumpet solo here. He has a lot of clearly articulated notes and rhythmically spaced out figures that build up tension. The swinging continues with the barren piano solo, and then Skoler finding himself in a playful mood with kind of nice phrasing that goes over the normal bar lines. So he's kind of being adventurous in his phrasing. Then the swing music fades over some dreary string figures that bring in news like narration on the 40th anniversary of Attica prison uprising, including some President Nixon audio recordings about the racial nature of the prison uprisings, and some eerie strings close out the tune. So.
Yeah, I wasn't happy about that because the clarinet, they faded out the clarinet solo, and he was really...
Yeah.
Blowing. It was really good. It was a fantastic. I wanted more of that solo.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a soundboard fade. It's fading it out too. So
yeah,
I don't know. I talked to a couple of people that had been in Attica. They were not nice guys. So,
but, you think it's just the whole the whole town is sort of like that?
Could be. Yeah, I don't know. Then we go to track 5, Newcomer. This is Aki Musire's arrangement. And he seems like he's having a lot of fun with the strings here, maybe too much on this piece. It's a busy rhythmic string arrangement that sits under the plaintive clarinet opening. Skoler makes it float and sing over a very nice piano accompaniment by Baron. The strings continue on with some rhythmic pizzicato mixed among the legato bowing. There's a little rhythmic string interlude before they cut out for some piano by Baron. Skoler's up next for a lyrical solo. Again, very nice phrasing that stands out here. The melody comes again, and it ends with an extended rhythmic string arrangement. There's a lot of strings going on in this one, maybe too much. Track 6, Moves, which I guess is a tune Mingus did, but the composer, I think, is Doug Hammond, and the arranger, again, Almazan on this one. Slow rising bass piano note figures sit under sparse clarinet and trumpet lines for an intro. Jasmine Horn is featured here on the vocals. Very nice phrasing and enunciation that's very clear on the unusual melody line. The melody, if you were to just think of the pitches, would be a little bit strange. So it allows you to focus on the lyrics a little more. And she adds a nice touch of vibrato to her voice that I thought was appealing. It's sparse, no strings, just a few weaving clarinet and trumpet lines around the vocals. She fades back with some vocalizations, and then McBride steps forward to work on some tight bass improvisation, over which Skoler floats some clarinet lines before it comes back to it. Just a short vocal phrase that she adds before Peyton comes up for a trumpet solo. He blows some clear, higher note lines. Then he gets a little bluesy, hands it off to Skoler, who's a little bit more abstract in his solo with some angsty ideas over a rhythm that's now changing. Then the clarinet and trumpet join together with the voice. It's unison, but actually her vocal is an octave lower, so it's a kind of nice combination of sounds that's working together lyrically, more legato over the busy shifting rhythm and drumming that then quiets kind of suddenly, and the bass for an ending with that too. So an interesting piece. I thought she would sing more or get another verse, but it sort of becomes more instrumental. But a nice arrangement, and we get a little break from the strings there. Track 7, back to Darcy James, Argue, arranger of Sue's Changes. This is a really long piece, almost 13 minutes, and changes is the words here. Right. So we get an intro of clarinet intervals, sort of the motif that this is built off. Peyton joins in on the interval idea. The cymbals kick it into a swing and a melody emerges, comes to just clarinet over bass with some string plucks thrown in. Trumpet joins in on a slow legato theme with a faint string backing. Then a new slow swing beat starts, but soon changes up to faster and feels that will keep you guessing while the trumpet and clarinet work together. These changes, as the title indicates, they just keep coming as the tune goes along.
Right.
The rhythm changes, the tempo changes. That's the whole kind of idea that's going on here.
Keeps you guessing.
Keeps you guessing. Peyton brings the interval idea back for the start of some soloing together with Skoler. It gets a bit wild. Then a new slow start for some lyrical Peyton playing. It doesn't stay still for long, with more rhythmic surprises popping up at every turn. Peyton gets to stretch out and surf over the accompaniment amusement park ride that goes on underneath, and he finally works up into a nice frenzy. There's a little reset for Skoler to make a new slow theme start, and then he's joined by Peyton as the rhythmic fun and games begin once more. They work together through the theme tightly, almost to the end where they split off onto their own improvisational lines, which kind of slow down. You think it's going to slow, and there's a final burst of energy that comes back up for the ending. Well, it's almost 13 minutes long, and it goes through all these constant changes, but it's a lot of fun. The strings on this one are there, but they're very subtle and more in the background. They don't stand out in the arrangement. Track 8, Aki Musire's arrangement of Invisible Lady, starts with a string intro for a melancholy melody from Skoler. It's a slow ballad, but there are some rhythmic bass and piano figure interludes between sections of the melody. The beat changes up. It kind of doubles. It changes in character and doubles up almost like it's going to become a samba or something a few times, but then it deflates kind of back to the original tempo. Skoler gets some warm bubbles at the start and end of his solo. That thing we always talk about, that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that low
clarinet sound.
Clarinet. Yeah. So he sort of,
one of my favorite things that instrument can do.
Yeah, he has it at the beginning and the end, and a kind of high soaring lines in between. So it's kind of like coming up out of the bubble bath and, jumping up there. Kind of image that I got from it. Baron has a kind of tasty but sparse piano solo there. Strings add backing, and after a little rhythmic bass figure, Baron continues on for a bit before Skoler returns to work through the theme again. The strings add some pizzicato touches before they close out, vamping on the bass figure. I get the feeling Aki Musire has discovered strings a lot, and he likes to do a lot of things with them. But I like the pizzicato touches in there. And the album finishes off with something I guess they did really down to the wire last minute, which is a Skoler original. It's the shortest tune on the album. No strings here. It's called Underdog. It's kind of an amorphous kind of piece, but it is pretty. A rhythmic bass solo intro from McBride starts it out. It works into some open double stopped intervals. I think it's like fourths and fifths you'll hear. Skoler brings in the rubato melody line. then it swells and flows, showing off his tone, while McBride keeps kind of pulses going underneath. As I said, there's no strings here. Baron makes a transition on piano with shifting kind of piano figures that move around harmonically, mixes it up a bit before Skoler comes back with kind of more uplifting themed lines. Underneath that all, Blake keeps free-flowing drum textures going, but they soon dissolve and disappear, and it fades out. So it's a pretty but amorphous and mysterious kind of piece that ends before 4 minutes comes up. That's it. That's the album. Overall, it's a pretty and heartfelt tribute to Mingus with interesting arrangements, some surprises in the rhythms and directions of tunes. You've got an all-star lineup of musicians here. Kind of interesting addition of strings, where normally I would prefer no strings, but they kind of make it a little bit unique. So I would say, a must listen for fans of Mingus's music, and Clarinets fans too will really enjoy this album. Skoler's tone is inviting, great technique, and masterful phrasing of melodies.
Yeah, when I heard this album, for me, the clarinet, piano, and bass stood out, and I didn't know who the players were when I heard it, so I looked them up. I was like, oh, this is really good. I wonder who this is. And of course, it was Kenny Barron, who I really like. Yeah. So, and Christian McBride too. So I like both of them from other albums, so wasn't really surprised. I was delightfully surprised to learn it was them, but because I thought I was maybe discovering someone new, but no. Yeah. As expected. They all solo and play tastefully, and that really makes this whole album. The album does have strings on it, which I'm really never a fan of in jazz. I think it just brings me back to all those Mantovani recordings from the 1950s or whatever. Yeah. But because a lot of they tried to class jazz up by putting strings on it back then, and I just thought it always ruined the whole feel. But here there are less of them. They're not massed strings, so they're not. It doesn't really bother me here. They're kind of interesting, I thought. And I like Mingus's music a lot, so I thought this was pretty great. I liked it a lot. I want to hear more albums like this, actually, with Mingus pieces on them. I also want to say the Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, which is probably Mingus's most famous composition. I didn't want this to end. I thought it was just really a beautiful performance. Yeah. That's nice. Yeah, I was like, oh, there has to be more, another track. I just wanted that to be the whole 45 minutes. It was really great. So at least sample that, I would say. Yeah.
That's a standout track, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we did a lot of clarinet tonight.
Yeah.
There you go. Get your fix of that for a while.
All right. Not an unappealing instrument by any means. No, I really like it a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of fresh sound in jazz.
It's an instrument, too, that I find, every performer has their kind of own unique tone and approach to articulation. So it's kind of easy to identify a player once you get used to their sound. It's a personalized sort of tone to the instrument, which I like. Yeah, good to hear. Well, that was interesting combination of different things, mainly focusing on clarinet. I think next week we've got something a little bit different in the works.
We're gonna do some. We're gonna get to my paisans over in Italy.
Yeah, some paisans, some Italian focus for next week. And,
I could do Italian classical. I got a few of those piling up now. So some pretty interesting finds, actually. Mine are all going to be kind of like off the beaten path things, so it should be interesting. It won't be like anybody famous.
And I've got a list of a lot of Italian jazz recordings. Facebook. Yeah, Italian jazz recordings that I want to get out.
Italian jazz is really cool. I really want to encourage people to listen to some of that. It's really good.
Great jazz scene in Italy with some, great musicians. I think, Italians, of course you could say it, they invented the music, all music. By that I mean,
well, they would say that. But
they would say that. The Greeks would differ, of course. But no, I think Italians.
So would literally everybody else on Earth.
But I think Italians have a big open mind to all styles of music, and they adapt and bring what they already have to other styles of music.
I'd say that's truer now than it was in the past. Anyway.
Yeah, could be. That. But especially what I find in jazz music is they bring a high level of technique, largely developed through classical music.
Well, the most important thing, too, in Italian music is melody. So this whole, bringing out a melody and just shaping it beautifully is really one of the key things in Italian music. And the jazz players do that really, really well.
And a lot of Italian musicians also have an affinity for Latin music, Spanish music, South American music. And so they bring that element heavily in, and they have a closeness and adaptability with the different kind of rhythmic things too, which I found make Italian jazz pretty exciting. And there's a lot of collaboration nature. I notice a lot of these Italian jazz musicians get together and they don't even make a name for the group or something. So they're kind of hard when you look through. It's just like, it's an album title and who's the artist. It's like 6 different names and it's all like, all just a bunch of Italian names there, but rather than, creating a name for that unit or whatever, it's just a collaboration that happens. So.
Incidentally, if anybody out there needs a name for their unit, ensemble, band, we've got them. Just ask us.
Yeah, just ask us. We come up with them. We've got a lot of them, of all different natures. So anyway, we'll go a little bit Italian. Actually, I've got enough for a couple weeks of Italian music, but maybe we'll split it up.
Let's split them up a bit.
I got some Spanish stuff to get.
I want to get another French episode in there, but I don't have enough yet. I'm still waiting for the French stuff to come out.
Get Frenched again for the 3rd time.
I got at least 2 more titles.
Okay. All right.
Use.
Well, something to look forward to. Yeah, so we'll get some Italian feasts in next week for episode 63, but this has been episode 62.
Yeah, and about that.
If you're still listening at the end of this program, which is going on a little bit
If you're
long
still listening,
tonight,
we want you as a permanent listener.
Yeah, do like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Check us out on Facebook, too, or on Deezer. You'll get the list of music for next week early. I'll get that out tomorrow. And any additional videos or comments about what we're going to talk about, we'll put up with a little bit of humor. Thanks again for our wonderful neon logo to Fast Signs of Staten Island. Always stands out among the other podcasts, being intriguing and seedy at the same time. Hints at lots of other things, and we appreciate that.
We want that. We want that illicit kind of feel.
A little bit. That's right.
Yeah.
And so until then, next week, wish you a happy week of listening, and we'll see you again next time.